Alrighty, chat. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice, and everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Okay, so couple of quick announcements, and then we have a very exciting interview. We're going to be talking with Thor from Pirate Software about gaming or mental health or whatever. And just a quick heads up, we are actually going to be, I'm going to be working on a super secret project next week. So we will not be streaming next week. We should continue to have uploads to YouTube, but we won't be doing any live streaming next week. And then in 2 weeks, we are going to be streaming with Michaela Thordarson, who about women's mental health. So I know that a lot of the content that we do is sort of from a male perspective. I'd say 50% of my patients have been women. So we will sometimes, it's not that we're completely ignorant of that. But women's mental health is not my specialty by any means. And I think it's important to get someone in here who can speak specifically to that. Also, Dr. Thordarson is super awesome. So we will have her coming in. And yeah, if y'all have other mental health professionals whose content y'all like and you think would be really fun to talk to or we could learn things about, please let us know. So we're looking for kind of more mental health professionals who specialize in different areas. I know a lot about a lot of stuff, but I'm not an expert in anything by any means. Or not everything. Maybe I'm an expert in some things. Who knows? Being a noob. So we're going to actually hop straight in with Thor. And let me see if I can find him. So let's go. Okay. I'm calling. And then I'm going to do this.
Whoa.
Hello. Can you count to 10 for me?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Awesome. Okay, so I think I'm going to turn you down just a pinch. And I can't see your video.
Turn on camera. There we go. It's going to be green screen, so you'll probably have to cancel it out.
That I don't know how to do that, but that's okay.
I'll do it. I'll handle it on my end then.
Hold on.
Boop.
We're going to do this. Where are you? Discord.
I can do it. I can count.
No. You're good. You're good. I think I just gotta.
I'm just reading chat.
Wait, where's the? No. The problem is I'm trying so hard to install Skyrim right now that I cannot find. Where's the Discord?
I was talking about Skyrim mods after you were bringing it up and how wild they are now.
Yeah, dude, it's okay. This is weird. Okay, let's try. Hold on a second. Let me try this. I'm going to try to change my overlay. We're going to, hold on. Okay, let's try this. So for some reason, it's not detecting my pop-out Discord window as a potential source.
F.
But we're going to try this one more time. You don't see Discord? Where did unknown connection failure? I wonder if that's it.
Ooh.
Oh, here we go. Found you. There you are.
Oh.
We've succeeded.
Hey.
I have succeeded. Tech support check.
Yeah, there we go.
I rolled my tech support and it worked.
You've done it.
I haven't leveled up much of it, but I have a racial bonus. So that's what I'm really relying on in terms of my.
Oh yeah.
How are you, man?
I'm doing really good actually. Yeah, just got off stream, so all of the goblins are here now.
Yeah, thank you so
can
much for rating us. But you don't have to do that. You can.
Oh no, it's fun because then the community can be engaged in it. It's yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really fun that way.
Yeah, I think so too. And so you go by Thor, is that right?
Yeah, it's my middle name. So I was born in a thunderstorm, and I got the middle name of Thor, and it's like, why not use it, right?
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
You were born during a thunderstorm?
Yeah. I was born in my dad made my middle name Thor. My brother got the middle name of Russell because he was born in fall, so he got rustling leaves, and I got Thor for mine. So I feel like I got the good one. Yeah.
So Russell is an Rustle or Russell?
EL. Yeah, it's EL, no double L.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And anything in particular that you want to talk about today, Thor?
Well, I was actually interested because you wanted to reach out to talk about game dev and mental health. And I'm actually interested in talking about that and seeing what your kind of take is. And I want to see what your lay of the land is specifically for mental health for game developers.
Okay.
Because there's so many people from the next generation that are entering the game development space now. And it's mostly because the tools that we have today are so much more accessible than they ever have been in history. So because of that, you can have younger people making games, you can have older people making games, you can have so many different people making games, and how you feel about the way that game developers are treated inside of this space by players and the kind of like mounting pressure for that kind of stuff and how it feels. Because I've got a lot of perspectives on that too, but I'm interested in how you feel.
Yeah, so I've worked with a ton of game developers. We work with a ton of game developers. There's a bazillion game developers in our community. So it's interesting because I have a couple of different perspectives. So one is we have a data perspective. So we have certain programs that game developers will go through. And so the neat thing is that compared to being like just a clinician who works with a population, we have a lot of internal data, like outcome measures. So we measure the outcomes of anything that we do basically. And so we sort of have like aggregate data about what works, what doesn't work. But then there's also like a clinical perspective of working individually with people who are in game development and what that experience has been like. I'd love to hear kind of your experiences of working in the industry. If you have particular questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I think...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah, so for me, for experiences in the industry, so I've been in the industry for about 20 years.
Okay.
I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, so I stayed there for 7 years. I started in game testing there, and then I became a quality assurance member. So like you go from game tester to quality assurance. That's like kind of the upgrade for that. And then after that, I became the lead of application security for Battle.net, which was all of the security for Blizzard's websites globally. And then after that, I became a senior red team specialist, which is offensive security. I'm a hacker. I left Blizzard because I realized I was deeply underpaid. Absolutely. I think I was making 36% of industry standard for my position. Left because I had been there my whole life. Went to Amazon Game Studio, which is right up the street. Got paid like an actual wage, and I was a automation engineer working in Python, working on the Lumberyard game engine. Then I quit that because I got my third black badge from DEF CON, which is a hacking convention in Vegas every year. And when I got that, the United States Department of Energy reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come hack power plants for the federal government? I was like, yeah, that's freaking rad. So yeah, 100%. So I ended up going and doing that. I stayed there for a year. And after working on that for a year, of our team of 7 people, 4 of them quit at the same time to go make their own security firm. So they took that. And basically, I was doing 10 weeks a year flying around the country. So like on call anytime, had to fly out. And they're like, hey, that's going to be 30 weeks a year now. And I was like, no, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I quit. And I was thinking about like, what am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait 2 weeks, kind of settle myself, figure out what I'm going to go next in my career. And 2 days into that, Jacksepticeye played our game Heartbound, and it just exploded because he played it to like 2.5 million people. And I have never done anything else since. I just make video games and I stream, and I've been doing that for like 6 years full time now. Well, 7 now, technically, because it's 2024 now.
Okay.
And most of what I do now is I help new people enter the industry. I teach them everything that I learned from making video games the whole time. I show them everything I possibly can. I run a Discord. We've got like 54,000 people in it to give them as many resources as possible to give them, that kind of a choice. And I find more often than not, people that are entering the industry now, they want to quit their day job and just jump over to indie games. And I try to encourage them not to do that. Keep your day job, use that to pay your bills, and do this on the side to give yourself more meaning in that hobby, and maybe work towards doing it full time one day.
Okay, that's a beautiful story, man.
Well, thanks.
I really love the way that you weave together kind of like notable points along with kind of your internal experience of it, right? So you don't just say like, oh, I left the Department of Energy. You talk a little bit about what caused you to leave, caused you to leave Blizzard, what caused you to leave Amazon Game Studios. So it's a really interesting narrative.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that context when I'm telling stories, I've learned how to do that over streaming for so long. Is like you have to give those kind of like little bits of context or people just don't understand. They're like, why would you leave such a high paying job? And it's like, well, there are reasons sometimes,
Yeah. How do you, I don't know if this is kind of too broad of a question, but what is your like internal compass like? So it seems like you have a very clear sense of priorities and how you make decisions. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I do a lot of stuff based on analytics for the business. So like if I'm doing business related activities, it's not an emotional space for me.
Okay.
Business related activities are always going to be analytic based. So I may have a general feeling of like this could be good, but let's look at the numbers and make sure that that feeling is correct before I do anything going forward for business related stuff. For emotional basis stuff, like for my personal belief stuff, for instance, I run a ferret rescue. That's something I do on the side. I don't do that for money. I do that for meaning, right? Something that gives me an emotional boost for myself. It's like I'm doing something really good in the world. You know, this is helpful for these animals and I can see the effect of that. That's something that I do from like just a purely emotional standpoint, right? And I still run the business side of that from that analytics space. Is like, do we, you know, are we making enough money to run that rescue? Does it actually make sense to do this? Am I going too far? Am I expanding it too quickly? That kind of a thing. So that's kind of the general compass that I do is like, if I want to do something emotional, I need to have the math to back that up. If I don't have the math to back it up, then it's too much of a risk, and I need to make sure that I'm basically tempering that risk somehow, that it's not foolish. And for the rescue, we actually put it up on Twitch, so that ended up making a ton of ad revenue and running the whole thing. Makes a ton of money doing it. Yeah.
So that's interesting because you say that you run the ferret rescue for emotions, but it's almost like there's an analytical part of you that is saying, okay, so for this emotional unit in my body and brain, I need to do something. So it almost seems like there's still analysis at the top.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, 100% is that. Because like I realize I want to do this. This is an emotionally fulfilling thing for me. But if I do it wrong, I'll cause more damage than good. And that's why there's the analytical side at the top of that. Because if I just jump into it head first, I'm like, we're just going to do this. And no, like you can cause a lot of harm because now you have a lot of animals that are relying on you. You've got a lot of systems that can go wrong, and it hurts much more outside of yourself. You know, and that's why there's that analytical side at the top. Is I can't do it any other way because if I did, it'd be dangerous, right? Too much risk. It's bad for me, bad for them.
Interesting. Was there have you always been like this, where there's analytics at the top?
I think that happened probably when I was about like 20, somewhere in there. I think I was homeless for a year. That's what caused that. I think I was very stupid before that for business stuff. I lived out of my car for a year in Colorado. It was not great. And I realized right then I need to stop screwing up. I had kind of like one of those moments where you're like, I need to figure out, I got to figure out my bullshit, right? Like I'm not handling this correctly. I put myself in a bad position business wise. And now I need to make sure that doesn't happen again, and it doesn't happen to me, and it doesn't happen to the people around me that I care about. So put analytics at the top, figure out something that works, and I started going forward with that, and it's been successful, and it's worked, actually. And I feel emotionally fulfilled by doing the stuff that I do, and I feel good because I know that I'm doing it based on, you know, something that we can see is actually working rather than just feeling it actually works, you know, like the math side of that stuff.
Are you comfortable talking about the period of time when you were homeless and what kind of led up to that?
Sure. Yeah, no, I actually used to make things in a game called Second Life ages and ages ago. So that was my first freelance kind of a thing. I did that for about 5 years. And I had a business partner and stuff screwed up. Basically, we had a 50-50 deal. We're like, oh, we had a 50-50 cut. And they wanted 80. They wanted 80%. I did all the programming, ran the business. They did the art. And I was too young, didn't know what I was doing. They wanted to do that. I said no. And they took all of our work and they open sourced it. At the time, I didn't manage my money very well at all. So I couldn't pay rent the next month. That was it. And it was like, well, now I don't have any money. I have no cash flow and debts are mounting and everything's going on. And I had to live out of my car. And it was a very eye-opening thing for me to realize like, hey, you need to not only, number one, you need to make sure that there's no way that someone can like screw over your business on, you know, without, you know, there being some kind of contractual obligation in place, some kind of legal ramification. You need to protect that in some way. And then also, I need to manage my money better. I need to make sure this doesn't happen again. It was never one of those things where it's like, oh, screw that person. I'm just going to wallow in sadness. It was like, we need to solve this puzzle. This is a puzzle that needs to get solved, and it has to be solved by me changing my behavior. And that worked really, really well.
Do you have a sense of why you didn't wallow in sadness?
I don't know.
Would.
I don't know. For me, I kind of approach a lot of stuff like puzzles, right? Frankly, that's kind of how it's always been since I was young, is like, this is a puzzle to solve, analyze the situation, be sad the whole time. Like, there's nothing wrong with having the emotions about it, right? Be upset, be angry, all that kind of stuff. Feel that. But at the end of the day, the only way you're going to get out of it isn't just by only feeling emotions. It's by solving the puzzle and getting yourself out of it, is how I felt about it. And it worked for me. I don't know if that works in every situation, but in the one that I had, that one worked very, very well. And it's worked for me since. So
Are there situations where you feel like solving the puzzle hasn't worked?
I wouldn't say solving the puzzle hasn't worked. It's just solving the puzzle led to a kind of a solution that I didn't want.
How so?
I was married for 10 years and I got divorced. And the solve to that puzzle was that. And it felt awful. It was horrible. It was something I had to go through. But that is something that I think a lot of people don't want that to ever happen. But sometimes that's the best for everybody involved. You know, and that's an awful solution to that puzzle, man. But sometimes it's the right solution, you know.
So that, I mean, that sounds like a situation where puzzle solving worked really well. I mean, even if it was painful.
Yeah, it worked,
Yeah.
but it's not the solution you want. You know, you want to find another solution to that generally. So I feel like it worked, but it's not the way you want it to work, even if it is the best way.
Absolutely. Are you, so Thor, what do you, like, I'm happy to talk about the industry in general, but I think you're just a fascinating dude.
Ask whatever you like. Open book, man.
So if I ask something that feels out of bounds, like, just let me know, okay? Can I trust you to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally fine.
So I'm so curious because you said that you had been doing stuff for Second Life for 5 years when you were 20 years old. That means you started when you were 15?
Not 20. I think it was actually around 23 when it all went wrong. I was in my early 20s.
What was your
So I started when I was 18.
What was your upbringing like?
So my dad actually worked for Blizzard for 23 years.
Okay.
He's a cinematic director for Blizzard Entertainment. If you know He Who Has No Life from South Park, that's him. That's not like a close to him. That's actually him. That's him.
I've seen
So,
your short on that. That's beautiful.
So growing up, I actually went to Blizzard's offices all the time. So like I grew up in Blizzard's office doing my homework on the floor and stuff like that. And I had this kind of culture of game development around me the whole time. And I was like, one day I'm going to make a video game, right? Before that, I wanted to be an entomologist. So I actually went to college to be an entomologist, and I ended up dropping out because I realized that wasn't the direction that I wanted to have in life. I still have a very huge love of insects to this day. I actually have Brazilian I have Madagascar hissing cockroaches over on the side over here. And then I have I used to have a Campanus pennsylvanicus colony, which is ants and cockroaches, right? And I keep isopods and all other kinds of stuff because I love that. It's such a cool thing to me. But I didn't want to do that for work. So I ended up dropping out of that, going and doing a bunch of other stuff, doing freelance work. And then before all of that, though, it was mostly like growing up in Blizzard's offices and being like, wow, this is so cool to make video games. Maybe one day I'll be able to do that. And I got so interested in technology and programming and trying things and taking the remote apart, almost putting it back together kind of stuff. You know, that's what I was very young, like, causing lots of problems too.
Did you grow up playing video games?
I did. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think when I was very, very young, my dad tried to keep me away from them because they were working on stuff like Diablo at the time. And they're like, maybe that's not good for a young kid to play. You know, just a bunch of Satanism stuff in the video game. They tried to keep me away from it, but that didn't last long. I think I was playing that I think it was like a year after it came out. I was playing Diablo 1.
And how old were you?
I don't remember. That was so long ago. I'd have to go back and look. I was born in 87. Let me actually see when Diablo came out.
So I think Diablo probably came out mid-90s, is my guess.
96, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was, let's see, it's probably
9, 10.
10 years old, somewhere there.
And Thor, what was high school like for you?
Oh, high school was weird. So I was a huge nerd in high school, massive nerd. And I had like very little social skills. Like I was really bad at it. And I think that was the time where I kind of like solidified humor as like a good defense mechanism, right? Because I wasn't very good at interacting with people. I didn't pick up on social cues. I wasn't good at doing that kind of stuff. So I was like, well, how do I fix this? I'm going to do it with humor. I'm going to make jokes because my dad's really sarcastic. So I was like, oh, that could work, right? I could use this as a mechanism to like meet people and hang out with them. And it worked great. It was actually really useful. And I still didn't pick up on social stuff until probably much later in life, like really. But all of that started there, where I was like, I'm a huge nerd outcast, but they're like, well, he's funny, so he can come hang out with us. So I was like, cool, I'm hanging out with all these people, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So it sounds like you figured out that humor was the way to solve that puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And what about your relationship or like your marriage? Are you comfortable talking about that? Like what that started like and what happened over the course of it?
Sure. We actually met at work when I was working at Blizzard, and we stayed together for a very long period of time. And everything worked really, really well. Everything's going super well. And then basically we just kind of had a different path in mind, you know? Like we had this idea where you kind of have the idea of like, oh, we're going to get married, we're going to have a kid, we're going to do all this kind of stuff. And then we had a series of just terrible, terrible things happen one after the other. So her father died of a heart attack, which was just devastating because it was like right after he retired, just absolutely awful. And then she got what is it called, thyroid cancer.
Oh my God.
So she had Hashimoto's and she ended up getting thyroid cancer. And then after she got the thyroid out, she was like, well, I'm going to start the family now. And I was like, that's not the time for that, right? Like I just can't do that yet. And it ended up being one of those splitting path things where it's like, you can do this now, but if you're not fully into it, that's probably not the right choice. You know, if you're not fully into, like, ready to have a child and do that kind of stuff, it's just not the right time, right? And it ended up being one of those things where it's like, I'm going to do this now because all these devastating things have happened. And I was like, well, I'm not ready for that. So we split, you know, and that was the whole thing for that. And it's awful. It's terrible, but I think it was the right choice. And she's gone off, she's remarried and everything's great there. And she's got a kid now. And I've gone off and I've done all the things I wanted to do and everything's great. You know, I think everybody's happier as a result of that, but it was awful to go through. And I think that's always a really tough thing, is figuring out what you want to do in a moment like that. Of like, what are the things that are going to go wrong? How is this going to turn out in the end? Like, there's so many choices. There's so many paths there. There's so many ways to feel about stuff. And I think we chose the right one, if that makes sense.
How do you go about navigating it when there's so many variables?
I sit down and I just think about it. I think a lot of the times people will try to distract themselves from a large issue like that. They'll try to watch TV or they'll try to screw around on the internet or play video games. Dude, I sat in bed and I was like, I'm going to sit down and think about this. I'm going to introspect. I'm going to feel emotions about this. I'm going to think about, you know, just kind of imagine what it would be like if I went down that route, the things that could go wrong, the things that could go right. How do I see myself down this path in 5 years? How do I see myself down that path in 5 years? And it took months to figure it out, of like what's going on there. And it ended up being in that sort of direction. It was like, okay, out of everything that it could be, this one makes the most sense. And then we talked about it and we did that and we moved forward. And there's no like negativity there or anything like that. I actually still talk to her mom. She still sends me Christmas presents and stuff, like super, super friendly, awesome people. And like, that's it, you know? And I think that's probably the most respectful outcome and the most like positive emotional outcome it could have been, because that can end so badly.
Yeah.
It could end with like a person you care about more than anyone else in the world. It can end in a way that you never talk to them again. And that's a huge shame. You know, it's not necessary. So
Thor, over the months that you're sitting in bed thinking about it, how do you know whether your thoughts are circular or you're making progress?
You don't, a lot of the times. Sometimes it just feels like you're spinning your wheels on stuff. At least I felt that way. Sometimes it was like, I've already thought through this. I'm overthinking this part. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's such a large decision in your life, you know, such a big one, that felt okay at the time. I didn't go into that path where it was like, I'm thinking about the only thing over and over and over again, and I'm not producing value in any way. I'm not moving forward with more of a solution to this. It was more like, okay, I've thought about that one before, put that one back to the side. There's like an emotional reason to think about that one again, the worst possible scenario, the best possible scenario. We know that those are there. We need to find out what's going to happen in the middle, because that's more likely. The worst possible scenario is less likely. The best possible scenario is less likely. It's always, usually it's going to be something in the center for that. So that was kind of how I pared that back, was to be like, okay, that's just the deep fear talking. That's just the absolute hope talking. What happens in the center? And kind of move forward with that and thought about those things to try and figure it out.
You have a very interesting relationship with your emotions.
That's probably true.
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your emotions?
I guess. I don't know. I think the thing is it's one of those things I try to keep them in check more than anything else. It's very easy to go kind of off the rails and feel emotions very deeply that are not productive. It's easy to get incredibly angry, incredibly upset, incredibly whatever, and lash out at people. But it's also really easy to be like, okay, hold up. I know this is happening right now. It is not productive for me to yell at you just because I'm angry. There may be a situation where yelling makes sense to relieve that stress from me, but doing that to another person is just going to make them have the same problem, right? It's like when you're upset at a customer support person. There's no reason to be upset at the customer support person. They usually can't solve the problem that you have. There's nothing that they can do. They're not empowered to fix the issue. Yelling at them gets your stress out, but raises theirs, and they get to go home and have a shitty day as a result. There's no reason for it. So in situations like that, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to stop for a minute, I'm going to figure that out. Later, I'm going to be frustrated about it, but I'm not going to be frustrated at this person. And I'm not going to be frustrated in this moment because that's just going to lead to more problems that then we'll have to go and solve. There's no point for that.
So, Thor, this is probably a hard question for you to answer, but do you have a sense, any idea of why you are like this and many people are not? Because you kind of say,
no idea.
Hold up, right? And then I don't know if this kind of makes sense to you, but there's a different part of your being that kind of takes over. So when emotions can sometimes take over and you're able to put the brakes on that, and then do you sort of understand what I'm talking about? Because you kind of use this phrase "hold up," and I think that's the hard part.
I think the thing for me is I've seen what happens when other people get very mad. I've seen what happens when other people just let the emotion guide them and they live in that moment, and the outcomes are random. They don't think it through. They don't think about what the other person could be feeling. They don't try to stop and say, how does that person feel? What would their perspective be based on their current understanding of the situation? They don't think about that. And when they don't do that, it ends up being a situation that's completely chaotic. You don't know the outcome. You don't know what could happen. And as a result, people can get hurt. People can be upset.
When did you discover that?
I don't know. I don't know if that was like a thing that I discovered so much. It's hard for me to know that, honestly. I've been like that a very long time.
When you were a kid?
Probably. It's probably some kind of carryover from when I was young. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
And when you say that people get angry and you don't, and the result is chaos, do any particular stories come to mind?
I'm trying to think. It's probably related to my mom. My mom kind of sucks, frankly. Very emotionally driven human being. So likely that it stems from that, which makes the most sense to me. I did have kind of like a rough upbringing with her, and I ended up moving with my dad. We had a moment. My dad and my mom split up when I was very young, right? And when they split up, we actually got the chance to like, which house do you want to live with from like the court? And I was like, chose my dad because my mom was very emotionally driven, and it just kind of freaked me out. And when I was young, I was like super analytical robot mode, right? Like I couldn't handle any of that kind of stuff very at all. And that's probably why I didn't have any like ability to interact with other people or kind of like understand like social interactions and stuff like that would be make the most sense to me. And the adaptation there was to be like, okay, I don't want to be like that. I'm going to do this a different way, right? And try it a different way. So I think that's probably the most likely result from that.
So when you say your mom was very emotionally driven, what does that mean?
Somebody that doesn't really care about the logic of a situation. Somebody who doesn't care about like, hey, you're mad about this thing, but here's a piece of evidence that shows that that's not real. And it's like, no, well, I'm mad because I'm mad now. It's like, okay, that's not effective. And I found that to be, I guess early me, it was like, this doesn't make sense. I would rather run through life based on evidence, information. It's one of the things that I talk to my community about a lot is like trust but verify, is trust that the other person's telling you the truth, but then verify their claim. And if you can't, don't spread that information, because if you spread that information, you're likely spreading something that can't be verified. It's likely fake, right? And people bring me like, wow, did you see the news for this? And I was like, no, I haven't seen the news for that. Let's take a look at it. And there's nothing to back it up right now. So let's wait. Let's wait and deal with that later when we actually have more information to make a valid, sort of assumption about it. And I think I learned all of that when I was much younger. Yeah. And it's funny, people in chat are talking about The Tower, which is a chapter in our game Heartbound. And yeah, that's completely what that's about. It's all about, my relationship with my mom growing up and everything like that. That's why I made that section of the game. It was kind of a cathartic thing for me to build that portion of the video game about that.
Can you talk to us a little bit? I'm unfamiliar with that. How? Sure.
So in the game, there is a character, a little bit of spoilers. There's a game that's a character that is the boss of the tower, which is like a working environment, kind of AAA. I've tried to take all my stuff that I learned from like AAA and like put it into the video game, make it something that people could identify with and everything like that. And the character of that is based around manipulation and gaslighting. It's about, preying on the emotions of another person. It's about using that as a weapon, right? And I wanted to kind of take the things that I had grown up with, the things that bothered me, and turn that into a narrative that was a little bit larger than life, right? But kind of hit at the core of the way that it feels when you're young, when a parental figure does that. Because if you are using any type of emotion or anything like that as a weapon, to a child, it's much more extreme. And that will carry with them for the rest of their life. And then when they become adults, they have to now absolve that problem. They have to figure out how to solve it now, right? And it can be a very monstrous thing. So that's made a monster out of it, right?
And when you say is much more extreme with a child, what does that mean?
I think for me, when I was young, it was, I guess, it felt like the norm. Like all people are going to be like this. So that's because you have
What
very
does
little
like
perspective.
this mean?
Lying to you about things, gaslighting, saying things that
Oh my
happened that
God.
didn't happen, all kinds of stuff, right? And
Okay.
it's a really bad feeling, right? So when you're young and that's your only perspective, it's very hard to see outside of that to see that other people aren't this way. It is very hard to see like, well, this person does this, so maybe all people are like this. And that's kind of how I grew up. I was like, oh, maybe all people are this way. And I learned very quickly over time. It's like, no, not everybody's like that. As your perspective starts to grow and expands, you're like, wait a minute. Now I can pick up on identifiers when somebody is lying to me. I can pick up on, maybe this person's not telling the truth in this situation. Maybe this person's just being overly emotional right now. You start to learn the social cues for different types of things. It's not the same for everybody, but there are pieces you can pick up that can carry over to other interactions,
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Any questions for me so far?
No, this is great. I think this is fun, actually. I think Chad is getting a lot out of it. They're all reacting to it, so.
Yeah. So, and we were, and I'm a little bit curious. So, Thor, you seem quite content.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, no, up until this year, I'd been streaming on Twitch for about 6 years. And if you remember when the Twitch leaks happened, when they leaked all the information, like financial information that we had on here, people thought at the time, because I was a partner, I'd been a partner for a couple of years, they thought I was like rich, right? And they're like, oh man, this guy's rich. He's a partner and all this stuff. I was making less than federal minimum wage doing streaming. And most of my money came from people buying the copy of Heartbound and like buying the merchandise and stuff like that. That was like where it was. I live on about $1,500 to $2,000 a month. That is not a huge amount of money, and that's including the mortgage, everything else, food, all of it. And it's because I live very frugally. I like to live frugally. It's something that I find a lot of joy in, because I'm like, how more efficient can I get this? It's always like can I do this in a way that saves more money? It's a fun game for me, basically, is what that is. And I enjoy doing that. So like once I got that kind of in, and then the stream took off in the last couple of months. We went from 450 average viewers, which was already the most I'd ever had in my life. We went from like 100 average viewers at the beginning of the year to 450. And then YouTube found me. And my stream now has 11, 12,000 people on Twitch side, another 2,000 on YouTube. It's wild. It's completely wild. And because we had spent all this time over the last 6 years setting up the Discord, making sure that there's stuff like the website develop.games, which is the website that I put together to teach people about making games, like all of these little buckets and things, there was something for people to stay. Because many times when you have that lightning in a bottle moment, you're not ready for it. Because it's like, wow, all of this interest, and there's nowhere to go, and it disappears. And that happened the first time when Jacksepticeye played our game. Ton of people came in. Ton of people left immediately because there was nowhere for them to go. And I was like, if this ever happens again, we'll be ready. And that's exactly what it is. So I feel very content now because, as you can see, everyone in the community is here. And to be real with you, as a content creator, your community carries you, hands down. It doesn't feel like my accomplishment, even though I planned for it, even though it happens because of the things that I do. It exists because of them, hands down, every single time. And that feels really nice to me. And all the nice messages that I get from people saying like, hey, you changed my life. I'm making video games now. I'm doing stuff on the side. I'm doing side projects now. I never thought I'd learn programming or any of this kind of stuff. Or other people that reach out to me about the ferrets. They're like, hey, people that surrender their ferrets to us all the time because they're in really bad medical conditions. I got 2 new ones in today, actually. So we've got 21 now in the rescue. And they're ones that are up for euthanasia, ones that are not going to survive. And we save their lives and we rebuild them, and that's something that's just incredibly emotionally positive for me. Like all of that is. So it's very fulfilling, incredibly fulfilling. And on top of it, with the massive increase in community, I already had all of my finances in order. So it's just done. Like all of my needs are met. Beyond all of my needs are met, frankly. So now what I'm trying to do with that is do things like run the game jams to give that back to people, give as much information out, make sure there's no ads on it or any kind of blockades, no kind of walls or barriers for that, to teach people more stuff. Because I came from the hacking community, right? So I'm often a security guy. Most of our community is about teaching you as much as possible, is to give you information, even if, no matter what, give you as much information, make that free. And I've carried that over for everything that I'm doing. And it just feels good. All of it feels good.
Yeah, that's fascinating, man. So I'm curious, what do you think about, like, or do you have any sort of religious or spiritual bend?
No, not at all, actually. I really like religion. Oh, wait, sorry. You're going to say something.
Go for it.
Yeah, I actually really like religion a lot. I find that sometimes people can twist religion into a weapon, which I don't really enjoy. I think that sometimes religion can be used to really benefit people, to teach them like, hey, don't be a dick, right? Don't be a dick to people. And that's a very kind of interesting thing, and it kind of takes a large path, and people have different feelings about it. But I've seen religion do a lot of good for people, and I've seen religion do a lot of bad for people. I'm not personally religious. I don't know where we go when we die, right? And that's not that scary for me, because the way that I generally feel about it is the reason that accomplishments that we have in life are accomplishments is because we have a limited amount of time on Earth. And we don't know how much that time is. It could be any amount of time. It could be 10 minutes from now, right? But the things that I've done, I feel good about it. And I feel like I've accomplished things because I had a limited amount of time to do it. And I feel like things like, I don't know, immortality would be more of a curse, frankly, because you're like, well, okay, well, if I had unlimited time, then what's the point? Why do anything today? Just do it tomorrow, right? So like with that, that's kind of my outlook in terms of like religious outlook is like, I'm just going to do things. And other people can have feelings about stuff, and I support that, and I think that's cool, as long as you're not ruining somebody else's game, right? That's really all that is. So don't be a jerk to other people on the behalf of something that you think is a greater good, because if it's not a greater good ever. If you're, hurting somebody else, there's no point to that.
So how do you? I'm kind of curious about what kind of motivates you.
I don't know. There's no like single point factor for that. I like solving puzzles. That's one for sure. I love to fix problems. I love to find problems and fix those. It's a big part of why I got into security in the first place. I'm always like, I'm offensive side. So I'm the guy that breaks in. I'm the dude that finds a way into the office. I'm the guy that, finds a way past security. I'm the one who finds a way into the network. That's what we do. We solve problems. It's fun. It's a puzzle to solve every time. And I like that a lot. And I think the biggest thing for me is if I can align my emotional feeling with that analytics side, I can do things like the ferret rescue, right? That's something that's like, I really want to save ferrets. I think that they're an animal that is not generally looked on very well by people. I think that a lot of people don't take care of them very well. I think that they're overlooked a lot because they're exotic. So exotic animals generally cost a lot more. So people get them thinking like, oh, I'll just put them in a cage. It's like a rat. And then they find out, no, this is a very high needs animal. It's a lifestyle animal. And they don't take care of them. It makes me really sad to see that. Like from the emotional side, it's like, this is awful. And there's not a lot of groups that actually take care of them. And then the analytics side pops in and goes, hey, how do we solve this? Because there's an emotional need there. So how do we solve this to make sure that emotional need is met and we get to do something cool at the same time? So both sides of it get appeased.
Thor, do you have a sense of purpose internally?
Sense of purpose in what way?
Like, do you have a sense? Like, so I'm with you that in the implementation, sure, we got to check the emotions, we got to check the problem solving. But what I'm kind of really curious about is like, what's the driving force? Is it because, over the meta of your life, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like, do you have a sense of that, or is it kind of really day by day?
I don't think there's a sense of that. I think I solved that for myself a long time ago. I don't really have like a driving thing that I need anymore. I don't think I have a need for that. It's mostly just like I enjoy doing this.
And when did you solve it? Do you have a sense of that?
I think after I picked myself up after being homeless. I think it's when I solved that kind of internal driving force. Is like, I solve this. Anything that comes after this, as long as I fit in that minimum guidelines of like, these are the needs that I have, the minimum needs, because I've already seen how bad it is if you go below that. And I don't want to ever go back there again. As long as I don't go back there again, we're good, And I find, I guess it gave me perspective on that, because many people will be like, oh, my day is so awful. Someone said something bad on Twitter. Like I just don't, that doesn't bother me at all. Like it could be so much worse than that. It could be way, way worse than that. And I don't think there's anything that hurts me in that way anymore. Yeah, I think it kind of got rid of that, frankly.
You're totally fine. So I get that. So that's what I'm kind of curious about is if we say like, okay, so you figured out what your minimum requirements are, right? To run the software of life.
Yeah.
So these are your minimum requirements. But then once those are satisfied, what is it that, because if you could just be satisfied, right? And you could just sit there, but you don't just sit boring. There. Okay. So is it boring? Is it boredom?
I don't even know if it's boring. It's just that, like, think of it this way. If you're sitting there in a car with a full tank of gas and you got an open road in front of you, are you going to sit there with a full tank of gas? Some people would. There's no reason to drive, especially if you don't have anywhere to go, right? I could drive on the road. I could not drive on the road. I choose to drive on the road. That's really what it is. Not because I have to, but because what if there's something over there that I haven't seen yet? I get to experience something new. Maybe there's something over the hill, right? I get to try something, and then there's new things to solve, and that's fulfilling to me, right? There's new experiences to have, new stuff.
Do negative experiences qualify as new things to experience?
They do. They're not the best thing to experience. I think they're teaching moments a lot of the time. You know, they'll teach you about something you don't like, something about yourself, something about the way that you work, something about other people or a particular person. Not something I want to experience, but it is something, right? Everything in your life is something that is an experience you can have. You can store that away and be like, okay, I understand this now. This person is like this. This group of people is like whatever it's going to be, right?
Have you ever tried like spiritual practice?
No, I haven't actually.
Any particular reason?
No, it's just not something that's ever really interested me. The idea of if you're talking about like ritual inside of practice, so you're doing like the same activity sort of thing in
or
religion,
meditation, Tai Chi, meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, any of that stuff.
No, I've never actually done any of those. I don't think I have anything against it. I've just never experienced it, never tried it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Can I think for a second?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
What do you want to talk about today, Thor?
I don't know. I think this is actually a really cool conversation, to be honest with you. I think so far it's actually been really neat because I've talked about things during this that I haven't talked about in probably a very long time, to be honest with you. I'll usually touch on some of these subjects on my streams, but not in this depth, I think.
What's cool about the conversation?
I think it's probably just something like that. Like I haven't talked about this stuff publicly, really. And that's something new, right? Doesn't need to be new, but it's actually kind of nice to talk about these things because I think most of the time when I'm on stream, you know, and I'm talking to the rest of the community, it's very kind of held back in certain areas for that kind of stuff because it ends up being a thing that is kind of negative emotionally for some people. They don't want to hear the negative side of stuff. They don't want to hear the bad things that you've been through. And I think in a setting like this, it's much more appropriate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So is it the novelty that makes it interesting?
No, I don't think it's a novelty. I think it's a positive thing because I think a lot of people have kind of a weird idealist sort of representation of streamers. And if I talk about these types of things, it may help some people understand that it's not like that. Everyone is a human being, even the people that you look up to. And I think that is beneficial in a lot of ways.
The idealism.
Yeah. Well, dropping the idealism and seeing that, like, even the people you look up to the most, they've had bad things in their life.
Yeah.
They've had situations where they failed. They've had situations where they succeeded. I think that is deeply important, especially in a time where so many people can look up to a creator and be like, I want to be that guy. And because I'm not that guy, I feel bad about myself. And I don't ever want that to be the case.
Yeah. So I'm kind of at a fork in the road of this conversation. And I think I'm going to need some help if you can help me out. So I find your personal story to be absolutely fascinating.
Okay.
I think you have, so I don't know how familiar you are with my background. I'm happy to share more detail about kind of where I'm coming from. But one of the things that I've been doing for many years, about 20 years now, is teaching meditation.
Cool.
And there are certain temperaments or even some karmic, it's really more karmic, although I recognize that that is a very charged word. You have a lot of so you're familiar with RPGs, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
D&D?
Are you talking about like karma and dharma?
Yes.
Okay.
Sort of. So like play D&D?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like to see? I have a box of D&D right underneath me, actually.
So I don't know what's the earliest edition of D&D you played? Do you remember?
First edition.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
first edition.
So old school. So
I've played everything from that to 5th.
Let's go back
campaigns.
to 2E, which is the greatest of all editions.
Okay. Yeah, good.
And,
good.
And so you know how like when you roll your 3d6 6 times and you get that 17 on charisma and you get your that whatever 11 on wisdom and 13 on strength or whatever you need to be a paladin, you got certain builds, right? But
Yeah.
unlike these noobs who play 5th edition, where it's like, oh, you get to pick whatever stats you want to. No, your stats get rolled, and then you have to pick an appropriate class.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Are we okay? So one thing is that in that way, I sometimes meet people who I think have the stats for what I would call spiritual multi-classing or prestige classing. Is probably the best way to put it. So I think really like being a monk or spiritual growth, like so you can have it as your main class, but it's really a prestige class for at least in the way that I do it. It's kind of like a prestige class on top of a normal thing. So I work with a lot of people in finance, programmers, things like that, content creators. And so it's just interesting to me anytime I meet someone like you, because a lot of what your experience of life is, even your capacity for hold up, which on the one hand signifies that your frontal lobes are quite robust and have strong inhibitory connections to your limbic system and your amygdala.
Strong brain.
But that it's so there's a neuroscience component to it, but in this other tradition, it's not just neuroscience, there's a whole spiritual aspect to that. The thing though is that's kind of what interests me, but it's like I certainly don't want to be pushy about my spiritual or religious beliefs.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm interested in learning about it, to be honest with you.
And the interesting thing is I'm not quite sure where to go with that. So that's why I'm kind of giving you two options. One is that I just notice this tendency in some people. And I think you've got the stats, like you qualify for the prestige class if you want to start leveling it up. And we could have a conversation about that, because it doesn't seem to me, so many times when I talk to people, they'll, ask for guidance or information on a particular dimension, but I'm not seeing that you need that in any way, shape, or form. So then the other thing is that we had a presumptive topic, which is like mental health for game developers, which we haven't really touched on, which we could absolutely spend time on. But I kind of leave it to you.
I'd kind of like to do the mental health for game developers. And if we have time, I'd like to do the other one as well. And if you want to talk about it offline too, I'm also okay with that, because I'm actually really interested in learning about that from you. That's not something that I really talk to a lot of people about or have a lot of information on. So that's actually kind of cool. I dig that. Yeah.
So what's the reason to talk about mental health for game developers?
For me, it's because there's a lot of people in my community that are game developers. There's a lot of people that are out there, and I think it'd be really beneficial for them to hear that. Like a lot of that is really, that's important to me, that they're getting as much out of that as possible, if that makes sense. Because I know like my needs in this case, like I'm interested in that topic, but I feel like a lot of people would be interested in the other topic, because I'm specifically a game developer, which is well known on Twitch, which is not a common thing today. We have the software and game development category, and there's not a lot of people that have kind of like broken out into the general internet for that. Yeah.
Can I just think for a second?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What kind of things would you want to talk about for mental health and game development?
Mostly demoralization for starting out developers. I think it's something that I talk to my community a lot about, but I'd be interested in your take, because this is your realm of expertise, and I'm doing it mostly from personal experience, which you may have a wider range of understanding for this. And I see a lot of the times people who are starting out that are doing this kind of stuff, they become very demoralized if their game doesn't take off, if there's not a lot of information that's coming in, like people aren't playing their game or anything, that stuff, and they feel like they're a bad developer and they never want to do something again. And the advice that I always give them is the same, which is make a bunch of bad games. It is okay to try and fail and try and fail and fail fast. And we've seen that many, many times from other developers inside of the industry. And not to tie your personal value to the legs that your first creations have. Tie your personal value to what kind of a developer was I 3 months ago? What kind of developer was I 6 months ago? Because many people have that kind of like extra voice that's saying like, you suck, you're bad, like all this kind of stuff. And they point out all the flaws to themselves, everything like that. But that's not a fair fight, because that's your internal monologue. You know your own weak points. You know where you're the most efficient, and nobody else knows that. That's you punching in places you can't block, right? So I tell them like, hey, if you want to make video games, you should make a bunch of really bad stuff. You should focus on your own self-improvement, see where you're going in that direction. And then as you put it out into the world, you should start taking feedback from others and then, bring that in and start becoming better and better of a developer. But I find a lot of the times people will start this process and they fall flat. They're like, I need to make the best game ever possible as my first game. And they just completely fail out because they either can't finish it. It gets really demoralizing because they never see the impact of their work. That's another big one, is they don't show it off to anyone because like no one can see it until it's out. They get halfway through a 3-year-long project as their first game and they just stop working on it because they're terrified of showing it to anybody. And my general stance is always like, make something in 30 days, put it out on the internet, see what people say, and then go from there. So I was wondering like what your take is on that for not just game developers, but mini creators, is the idea of I have to do it perfect. I have to do it immediately. And like I need to do the best possible thing. I got to buy all the kit and show all the stuff or no one's going to care about anything that I make.
Yeah, can I think for a second?
Sure.
So you give this advice, right? So just make something in 30 days and put it out there.
Yeah.
And how does that work? How does that work for people?
They love it. A lot of people are super into it. And it's mostly people are like, I was trapped in AAA and I wanted to make stuff and I didn't want to do it. I didn't have an opportunity to do this kind of stuff, and it works for them. And it ends up working for them really well. But I'm wondering if there's anything kind of larger from that I'm not seeing because I have such a narrow viewpoint from specifically game development, specifically streaming.
Yeah, so I think there's more to it. I don't know that it's actually. So here's my kind of take on this. So we deal with a lot of demoralization as well, sure. And I think we're going to end up talking about the former, but like isn't topic number one. So let's just understand a couple of things, okay? The first is so when you say make a bunch of bad things and put it out there, that's coming from your temperament. So okay. I think that advice, so like here we are talking about this thing because you want to help your community, right? And then I ask you when you give this advice, how does it work? And you're like, it's great. And then I'm sort of thinking like, okay, cool. So then like, why do we need to talk about it? Because you've already figured something out that's very effective based on your personal experience, resonates with people. I'm an expert, but I mean, dude, if what you're doing is working and it's helping a ton of people and that's what you're advocating for, you know why? So then the flip side of it is, okay, what about the people that it doesn't work for?
That's the thing is it's really hard to see that.
Yeah. What do you mean see that?
It's hard to see the people that it doesn't work for because either they won't say anything or they just disappear.
Absolutely. Or they don't exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Or I just don't know.
Right. Yeah. So now what we're doing is we're like trying to solve a problem for a group of people that we're not even sure is out there, how big they are, what the nature of their resistance to adopting your thing is. And like, we can do that. I'm enough of an expert to walk you through what their psychology and all that good stuff is. But I think it's kind of like what we're doing is because you want to do something for the benefit of others instead of the benefit of yourself. We're moving further and further away from the data set that we have and getting into hypothetical realms to like help these people and I think that like it's in a sense we can help them, but it's not going to work because their personal value is so baked into what they do. They have difficulty separating their ego from their performance. That's the first thing that needs to change. Yep. Right? You can't just tell people to stop caring about the way that you look when you go to the gym. It just doesn't work. Now, there is a process of that. We can talk about that, but I don't think that's the conversation to have with you, because that's the conversation to have with the person who's in that situation. Hey, Thor tells me that I should stop caring about the product of my work, but y'all can take a look at and I'm not trying to be racist here, but there's a cultural element to this. Anytime we interview Koreans, especially like Korean streamers, every single Korean or almost every single Korean I've interviewed on stream has this very, very, as you said, this extra voice, this self-critical voice that just destroys them.
Yeah, culturally, that's more common in some cultures than others. So I can understand that entirely.
And a different flavor in Indian culture, but for whatever reason, just the Koreans, they kind of come to the top of mind for me. And not to say that's present in every ethnicity. So you can always grow up in a household where people can be critical of you. You internalize that voice and stuff like that. But this is kind of like where we're solving someone else's hypothetical problem, right? We don't have good data. I mean, I can give you a lecture on it.
No, I mean that makes total sense. You know, it comes to the point where it's like mostly I just wanted a sanity check on it, I guess. Like
Yeah.
the general sense of like, does this make sense? Even thinking about this, and you're right. Yeah, no, you're completely right about that. It is solving a problem that isn't technically a problem. It's mostly kind of like, I don't even know what the term would be for it, because it's not like something that I spend a huge amount of time on. But it is one of those things. That's like, I wonder if this is working to the effect that I think it is. You know.
Sure. And I get the sense that you feel obligated to try to help your community because that's one of your central compasses, right? So you're like, okay,
Definitely.
like how can I help other people? Because like I don't necessarily need help. And I think this is what's the cool thing about things like this is that I think paradoxically the best way to help them is to have conversation, number one.
Yeah,
Because
no,
if
it makes
we
sense.
talk-
And I know I can't solve everyone's problems, though I can't fix all of that for everybody. So it does make sense. And yeah, you're right. You're 100% right.
Okay, so you said you're kind of interested. So let's talk about meditation, spirituality, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely.
So you said you're interested in it. What are you interested in?
I'm interested to know because for many people, that kind of spirituality is very unique for each person. Some people handle it in different ways. They go by different teachings. There's so many different ways of handling it and doing that kind of thing. And I'm interested in what your take is on that because for me, a lot of it is going to be unique for you, and like the way that you handle it, and the way that, especially approaching it from your, kind of education on this, the way that you do it is likely going to be very interesting, if that makes sense.
Interesting in what way?
Interesting because it'll be unique. You can see a lot of things, like if you go on like YouTube and stuff, a lot of the times you'll see kind of like a lot of people saying similar things, the very same things. But when you're approaching it from kind of like your educational standpoint and your interaction with other people, especially with people that are like, content creators, it's going to be very different. We have a whole bunch of different types of problems. You met so many different people with so many different kinds of problems that you've helped them walk through. You probably have a very unique perspective, very different perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I find that to be more valuable, I guess. Does that make sense?
But is there a particular part of my perspective that you're interested in?
That's a hard one. I actually don't know. I don't know if there is. I mostly just want to hear your take on it, see you walk you through it.
So, so Thor, what are you?
What?
Like, what are you?
I am a bone mech piloting, being piloted by about 2 pounds of meat in my brain. Right?
Okay.
So it's like fat in a bone mech with meat armor. That's,
Okay, well said.
I don't know. I'm a single point in the universe for the time period that I'm here, and I'm going to do the things that I want to do in that time, and hopefully people will like those things.
What is
kind
the
of what that
I?
is. What is the I?
Yeah, you said I'm going to do those things that I want to do. What is the I?
The I is the thing that exists within that time period, right? This. Maybe we exist after it. I don't know. But for now, we have a physical form, and if that physical form breaks down, then we got who knows? That's kind of the big question.
So you have a physical form. What else constitutes you?
If you made an exact clone of a person, this is always the question, right? If you made an exact clone of the person, their mentality would be very different. We've seen that with twins. They obviously don't have the exact same mentality. So I think you're a collection of those experiences and how you handle those experiences too. But if you gave the same people the same experiences, what happens? Don't know. I always liked that in Star Trek, actually. Is the idea in Star Trek is that when you teleport, it actually deconstructs the old body, constructs a new body, and then implants the same memories into it. And I always thought that was a very interesting thing because it brought up a lot of sort of ideas in Star Trek of like, are you dead when this happens? Well, it's still you, but is it you? Like, is there a consciousness component to that disappears during that transaction? Or are you actually just a collection of the memories and we can rebuild you? Don't know.
So this is what I would... Great. This is going to be good. So
okay.
my first response is there's actually a way to answer that question.
Oh.
Right? So we're approaching that question philosophically, which is what Star Trek is really great at. But
yes, I love Star Trek.
The reason I love spirituality is that there's an experiential answer to that question that you can know. It's not philosophy. And actually, the process of that knowing is literally what in my opinion, are the version of spirituality that I walk and I'm sharing with you, and what I think you would be, what you have the stats for, let's say. So let's go, and we're going to help all the people who get demoralized, by the way, so don't worry about that. And it's beautiful how these things work out. So you said that you have a physical form.
Yeah.
Is that
As far as we know, anyway.
yeah? Is that all that you are?
I don't believe so, no.
What else?
The way that you manage that form, there is a consciousness within that, whether that is derived from something or not is unknown. Like a lot of people talk about it, at least unknown to me, right? And I think that's the biggest thing with that is, yeah, the way that you pilot that mech is kind of the whole point, right? So just having the physical form is irrelevant. Having the ability to pilot it in a certain way is the important part.
Okay. And what are the components of piloting? This is great.
Figuring out how to, how you want to interact with other people, if you can do things
What is
that end
it
up
that
being
does the figuring
positive.
out?
That consciousness, whatever that is, the
Okay.
spark.
So let's understand this. Is consciousness, what are the components of consciousness? So let's like take a programming example. Like what is like, how there's like integers and whatever the other variables are in programming. Like there's like
Sure.
like float things, or I'm rusty on this. So what is like the what is the variable class of consciousness?
So defining that specifically.
Yeah.
I would say,
because we've said
I would
there's a
say-
physical form, which has the physical, the class of matter, right?
Yeah.
So what is like the stuff that is not physical?
the stuff that is you that is not physical, honestly, I think it's kind of interesting because many people kind of look down on animals and say like animals don't have a consciousness, they don't matter, anything like that. But I find that the more that you look closely at pretty much any living thing, you'll see that each one of those individuals most usually will act differently than their counterparts within that side of that, right? I think those differences is what that is, most generally, to me. So like if you look at a dog, one dog is going to be very...
Hold on.
Oh, sure.
Hold on. Yeah. So, sorry, is it okay if I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go for it.
So fine. So there's personality. So we can explain to you what personality is. We're gonna do some stuff at the end for all the people who get demoralized. We're gonna do like a 15 to 20 minute, 30-minute rundown of who you are, what your different components are, what your personality is, what your identity is. Those things, by the way, are completely opposite. They're not the same thing at all, which a lot of people don't understand. And then we'll end up with helping people who get demoralized by their failures to understand why they get demoralized and where that demoralization comes from, and why someone like you does not get demoralized. Because the whole issue is that when you have a failure at this point, it does not affect your being.
No, it doesn't.
Right? And other people, it affects their being. So what is the mechanism of action? What is different? Because the stimulus is the same, but the response is very different. And something about the way that these two things are connected, because the stimulus happens, is like a drop of water in a pool. And depending on the substrate of the pool, what we create will be different, even with the same stimulus. Okay, so we'll get to that. But I'm going back to this, which is like, sure, you say that, okay, dogs respond differently. By the way, do you think that plants have consciousness?
Not in the same way that a lot of people think. I know they communicate. I'm actually really into mycology, which is like fungus, right? I actually have a mushroom farm. And one of the things that we have is many plants will actually communicate to each other through mycelium, which is like a pretty interesting thing through trade and information like that. So if you damage a nearby plant, many of the other nearby plants will actually stop growing in some cases for certain types of plants. And that's communication, and that's response to stimuli, even though it's not a response to its own situation. It's a response to a nearby situation. In that way, I feel like that ends up being effectively consciousness, right?
The answer is yes.
You are being, yeah, I would say yes. Okay. That's why I wanted to kind of phrase that around it. So I would say, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Yeah, you're definitely qualified for the prestige class. Okay, so let's go back to the substrate, though, right? So you said that dogs respond differently. Sure, animals have consciousness. As an aside, I think the biggest difference between animals and humans is our ability to run against our biology. Sure. So to my understanding, there is never an animal that has chosen to be celibate. And if you give dogs that are raised vegan the opportunity to eat meat, they will eat meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we really look at like
there's a whole lot of stuff down that route.
the core is the biggest area of difference is that I think human beings fundamentally have a greater capacity unclear whether it's binary or not, to run against our nature.
Makes sense.
But let's go back to this. So, like, what is the substance of the you that is not physical? So you call it consciousness. What is that?
Collection of experiences at that point.
Okay, so let's
and how you manage them.
Let's understand. Okay, so you said experiences and management.
Yeah.
How do we experience things?
So we experience things through emotional stimuli, like when we're interacting with another person, how we feel about that based on the other experiences we had in the past. There may be, chemical change that makes you angry or makes you upset or whatever it is that's going on. A lot of the time someone will have an emotional reaction. They don't realize why. They need to sit down and stop for a moment. Like, why am I having this emotional reaction? Right? There's that. And then there's memories of the things in the past, whether they are perfectly memorized or not, whether they are kind of just an idealized version of that memory or not, is kind of up in the air. But like those are down to how you form those memories and how you act on those in new situations. Is sort of how that is. And that's unique for each person. And that does form a personality. But I think the consciousness part is you stopping and going, okay, I have these memories. Is this correct? Does that make sense? Oh,
sorry. I'm gonna change gears on you for a second. I'm gonna start taking notes on what you're saying, because I'm doing that anyway. But I think this is gonna be great. Okay, so I'm gonna just change my overlay, and I'm gonna screen share with you to make sure that you can see. So we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this. Go live. Oh God, why is this so laggy? Hold on. We're gonna see if I can pop back in. Okay. Yeah. Can you see it?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So. All right. So let's understand what the nature of a human being is. Okay.
Sure.
So you said that there's you.
Yeah.
And so how is it that you experience things? You say that we have experiences.
You have experiences through that physical form. It's always going to be through the filter of that physical form, right?
Okay.
Like if you have bad eyesight, you're going to see things differently. You see things in the corner of your vision.
Whoa. Yeah, this is great. Hold on. So eyesight. Good.
Yeah.
And then you also talked about, so when you have an experience, you also mentioned memory. You mentioned emotion.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so let's understand this. So how does an experience happen?
So an experience happens because one of those physical sensations or visual sensations, something that you are taking in as information, but it's through the filter.
Hold on. Sorry, I'm going to keep interrupting you because this is great.
Totally fine.
Okay, so you said take in, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to understand that there's something called an indriya. An indriya is a sensory organ. And as you mentioned, so an experience starts with an input, right?
I can agree with that.
All right, then what happens?
So you take that and it is filtered by kind of the quality of that input. Like maybe you don't have very good eyesight. Maybe you don't have the ability to touch and feel as good as another person would be. That is always going to be changed by your physical body, whatever it's going to be.
Okay, so there's a physical capacity for the indriyas. 20/20 vision. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that. Okay, fine. So you mentioned filter. So what we're talking about is a limitation of the indriya when you use the word filter?
Yes.
Okay.
That is exactly it.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm going to just erase that because I wouldn't call that a filter. I'd call it a quality of the input.
Quality of the input makes sense. Yeah, the signal.
Okay, then what happens?
So after that, it's going to be, you may have a reaction to it immediately. There might be an automatic emotional reaction that happens before the kind of analytical reaction. And then the analytical action, for me, kicks right in and goes, wait a minute. Don't have the emotional reaction. That's always the first. The emotion reaction is always the first. It is the automatic response. I should jump away, I'm afraid. I should punch. I'm in fight or flight sort of a situation. And that can happen in many different ways of I need to hide, I need to fight back, I need to run, anything like that. And then after that is the analytical. And then we store in memory is how I kind of feel about that. And the memory storage may be different based on, it is colored by the way that the situation was handled from your perspective, which may not be the full truth.
Okay. So this is cool. Okay, so let me ask you this. When you say that there's an emotional reaction,
Yeah,
how would you describe... Do you like peanut butter, Thor?
I do.
Which part of you likes peanut butter?
Okay, I see where you're going with that. There are certain parts of me that can kind of have the sensation of peanut butter, right? Like I can taste it. I can feel the texture on my tongue. It may be good to eat it, right? It may give me like, oh, I'm not hungry anymore, sort of a thing. And it reminds me of times when I've had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. There's a lot of different pieces that can kind of have that experience.
Yeah. Okay. So let me put this back, right? So there's a taste. We've already accounted for that. That's the indriya. There's a memory of past peanut butters. Fair enough.
Yeah.
There is the analytical portion, which can say peanut butter is healthy or unhealthy. We should eat more of it or less of it, right?
There's that. Yeah.
What about the part that likes? So even the first time you try peanut butter, there's this taste. And the taste, let's assume for a moment that the taste of peanut butter is like conserved between human beings, right? There's this philosophical question of, is red the same to everybody, whatever. But like we all kind of agree that peanut butter tastes like peanut butter and orange juice tastes like orange juice.
Yeah.
So there is a part of you that is not analytical, is not memory, and is not taste. So there's the physical quality of taste, but then there is the part of you that likes or dislikes.
Yeah.
Where would you put the part of you that likes or dislikes on this map? What do you think it is
Emotion.
the closest to?
I would say it's closer to emotion. And
So
the
this is
reason
great.
why is I can like or dislike something that is bad for me. And the emotion side goes, do it.
So
And the
cool.
analytical side goes, do it in moderation.
Congratulations. Congratulations. You have just discovered the second Sanskrit word, manas.
Oh.
So manas is our reactive mind.
Okay.
So manas is the part of our mind that, first of all, acts first. This is where our emotions come from. And this is where we also have likes and dislikes. Do you like olives? Do you dislike olives? Do you like peanut butter? Do you dislike peanut butter? Something about us likes and dislikes, and the speed of liking and disliking is the same as the speed of emotion. If you tunnel down into this, you will discover this. But it happens first.
That makes
Right?
sense.
Emotion is different, but so now we've discovered option number 2. Okay, so now we're going to kind of move this over here. We're going to take the reaction, and there's a reaction in the manas. And then you mentioned a couple of other things like so then you mentioned analytical mind, and the analytical mind is fundamentally different from the manas, right?
Yes.
So the analytical mind is what we call buddhi. So you've discovered the third Sanskrit word. So buddhi also has a couple of other features. It is analytical. It is also responsible for discrimination. So by discrimination, I mean literally to be able to divide things.
So pattern recognition and discrimination.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Pattern recognition we'll get to in a second. Sort of. Because for a pattern to exist, we have to have a memory.
Makes sense.
Right? So
Yeah.
this is our analytical capability. So we can analyze patterns. We can analyze our memories. Pattern recognition is kind of a storehouse of knowledge. It is not the same as an analytical capability. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yes.
Okay. So now the question is, how does a memory form?
Okay. Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah.
How I feel? Okay. So I think, like, in this case, you have Indriya. So that's the incoming information. That goes into, what is the second one? Is manas?
Yes.
Manas. So that goes into, we have a reaction, immediate responsive reaction. Do I like it? Do I dislike it? Is this something positive, something negative? Do I have to have an immediate response? Does it need to happen before we analyze the situation fully? Like, is it a fist coming in our face, sort of a thing? And then after that, if it can make it past that point, then we have the analytical side that then goes, okay, we have all the information now. Let's stop for a moment. Let's think about this. And it gets stored away. Sometimes I find that memories stop at the reactive mind and immediately become an immediate memory in that case, because the emotion of the situation is much more powerful than the analysis of the situation. And that memory may come from there. Sometimes we remember, wait a minute, I felt this way, but it actually meant this, which means the memory is now changed by the analytical side of it, if that makes sense.
let's say there's a memory. So we can modulate memory with buddhi,
Yes.
right? And we can change its temperament, let's say. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So you
the
mentioned...
way that we recall it basically can change from that.
Okay, so buddhi has the ability to modulate memories, but how do memories get formed?
I would say from that immediate, like the reactive mind. I
Good.
would say usually it's from that. Yeah.
Spot on.
Almost always. Okay.
So we're doing spirituality at this point, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
I find that to be really interesting, actually.
Yes, I know you do. That's why we're doing it this way. So
I love that.
so
That's
so
cool.
we're gonna let's understand a couple of other things. So now let's talk a little bit about science. Okay.
Okay.
So what we know about the formation of memories is that there are a couple of things that are important with memory. One is recency. You are more likely to remember that which happened a little while ago than that which happened some time ago. The second thing that happens is that memory is tied to what we call salience. And salience oftentimes has to do with emotion. So if you look at our brain, we have this part of our brain called the... Let me just show. Okay, I'm looking at Dark versus Clem. We can watch Dark versus Clem
Hairs in my
later.
face.
Wait, can you not see this?
Oh no, my hair was just in my face. I had to get it out of it.
But can you see the screen share?
I can. Yes, I can. It says salience into emotion.
Okay, so we're gonna... Okay, GG. Never mind.
Did something break?
Nope. I was gonna show you something, but it's fine. So let's look at neuroanatomy.
Okay.
So here's your brain. Okay, so we have this part called the limbic system, which is kind of over here, which is our emotional circuitry. And right inside it or next to it, we also have our hippocampus, which is our memory part of the brain. These two things are very close together. So what's going to happen is our memories are largely formed by our emotions.
Makes sense.
And furthermore, not only, so you talked about this Indriya thing, and this is where I'm going to say, you use the word filter, but what I'm going to say is that our memories actually act right here.
Okay.
So you get an Indriya, and then your memory recalls, your memory attaches relevant information, which will create a particular reaction.
I can agree with that. That makes sense.
Okay? So let's just run through a simple example. Let's say I have a phobia of dogs. If
Yeah.
I have a phobia of dogs and Jesus. Okay. If chat wants to see Thor's camera, I'm going to need a minute. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
We
That's so
can,
funny.
they want to see his hair. But Discord's not showing it to me because I'm screen sharing. I don't think
That's
I can.
so funny.
No, okay,
It's okay, chat.
I
It'll
can
be all right.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. Hold on. I'm still screen sharing with you, right?
I talked about fixing my hair and they're losing their minds now.
Okay. So you can see my screen sharing?
Yeah, I can see everything.
Okay. Oh my God, he can see everything. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna have to create the.
See everything.
I'm gonna have to do this. Okay. Source. No, we're gonna. Oh God, did I screw something up? No. Hold on, dude. Do you realize what y'all are asking, bros? Okay, hold on. Add a. Not new folder.
The technology shit.
Thor. We're just going to call it this. Now, Thor is going to have a source inside it, which is going to be a screen capture, which we're going to do. Ooh, let's see if this works. Nope. And this. Oh, God. Hold on, chat. Okay, if you guys want this, I can do it, but then y'all have to stay with me for a second, okay? Fucking throwing me off my game. We're going to try one last time. We're going to do a window capture. Add source. Discord video. And then we're going to make this over here. And now we're going to click one button, and if this... Ha ha! Did it work?
Stream is evolving. It's happening.
Okay, I've done it. I've done it.
Chat.
Okay, so but chat, you guys can now see his face and my face and the thing, right?
There you go.
Okay, did it work though? I literally can't see it because if I see it, then it'll go away because it has to have you. I have to have you on my screen.
It is working.
Okay, it is
good.
working. Let's continue that, and you can still see the iPad.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great, man. That was a
Actual
DC-20.
wizardry.
That was a DC-20 tech check, okay? And if it's
Got
not
it.
aligned, y'all can go fuck yourselves. We're not dealing with that right now, okay? All right, so let's go back to memory. So now remember that memory can filter our sensory experience,
Yes.
okay? So
I
now
found it to be interesting because that's kind of where that happens for kind of like a preconceived notion for something. Like this is going to go bad before I even have information to say that it's going bad.
yes, don't worry, we're going to help the demoralized people. Okay, so now
That
let's
makes more sense.
give you an example. Let's say there's person number 1, and this person is Thor. And there's person number 2, which is person in your community who does not get helped by your advice. Advice doesn't work. So when Thor looks onto the internet and sees a failure, this enters your indriyas.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But then what happens is you have something over here that shapes your reaction to the failure, which results in a change over here. And this change is going to be, okay, let's learn. The buddhi takes over.
100%. That's
Okay,
exactly
now,
how I handle it.
The other person has a failure out there. Their indriyas see this failure, but they don't say, what can I learn? There's some kind of reaction over here that makes it, fuck, I'm a loser.
That does make sense.
A high amount of negative emotion, and there is a high amount of other quality that we have yet to discover. So this is the problem over here. Because what do you actually add? You add, okay, so let's think about your memories, right? Failures make me stronger.
Yep.
I can survive failure.
I have survived failure.
Yep. And that's
the
why
biggest
yeah, sure. So I have, making me fucking erase this. Okay. So since your mind leverages these things, which are based on your memories, and we'll talk about that in a second, this is why you have a differential response to the same stimulus. Now, what tends to happen is you give people this advice, and let's understand for the person in your community, not this person, but the person for whom it works. This is what happens. So they're over here. They want to do a task, but their emotions are like, nah, brah, that's going to hurt. And then what happens is they have another indriya input. And along comes Thor. And Thor says, do it. And then they have an emotional reaction to what you say. Because if they just have a logical reaction, they're like, I don't know what the fuck. But then what happens is Thor inspires them. Then what happens is the nah, brah, and the inspiration, they fight. And if the inspiration wins, they decide to try it. And if they try it, one of two things happens. We'll get to this in a second because we haven't quite figured out how memories form. This becomes really important. Because if they try it, either they develop confidence. And what does that confidence mean? This confidence means they literally get to plagiarize your thought.
Which I want them to.
Absolutely, right?
Yes.
So I survived. But that doesn't happen to everybody. What happens to some other people when they try it?
If they fail, and then it reinforces that notion before of I am a failure.
Okay, right.
Which
So
might
now
make it
there's
worse.
there's right. So there's reinforces I am a failure.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's why when I'm explaining things to people, especially like with a one-on-one kind of a situation, I try to talk to the person for a minute, get information about them, and then try to pose that in the way that is best suited for their kind of communication style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Sometimes people need a little bit of extra care. I don't have all the time in the world, but for the ones that I do have time for, I can. Yeah.
So now there's a differential reaction. Now this becomes everything. Do you see this? Because if we can figure out how to go down this route, then your advice will work for every human being on the planet.
I don't think that's realistic.
Of course it is.
Is it?
Yes. Why not?
Because for me,
show me what the logic, where the logical error is in this system.
If it could be possible, silver bullets I find to be very rare. a system that always works 100% of the time, I find to be very rare. I always feel like it's not a matter of...
I would disagree categorically with that. I would actually say the opposite, that
Really?
most systems work 100% of the time. That
Really?
the nature of the universe is that gravity isn't fluctuating, it's gravity.
For systems like that, I would make sense. Yeah, I would agree.
When does that system disappear? When do we stop having that system?
So I think when that system disappears is when I don't have enough information to pose that sort of stance to that person in the way that they need to hear it.
Well, hold on. But
that's why that system breaks down.
Yeah, but it's not a problem with the system. It's a problem of your lack of understanding of the system.
Sure.
If
Agreed.
we understand the science of mind, and we've done a pretty good job already, if we can understand how to push people from this reaction to this reaction, they'll turn into you.
We can win every time. We can win every time then.
We can win every time, right?
But the amount of information required for that is enormous, and it's unique for each person. Is it not?
No, it's not.
Okay, tell me.
Right? So hold on a second. Let's just understand this. This isn't crazy talk. Okay, you have a brain, right?
Yes, I would hope so.
How similar is your brain to my brain? Is your hippocampus in the same place as my hippocampus?
Likely. Yeah.
Likely. Frontal lobes are the same.
Yep.
Limbic system is the same. We all, do any of us experience emotional reactions before sensory inputs?
I see exactly where you're going with this. It does make sense.
Right? So this is just the reason it feels like it's impossible is because we're not competent enough. I mean, if you ask me, Dr. K, how do I make a video game? I'd say it's fucking impossible because I don't understand what variables are. I don't understand what integers are. I don't know Python. I don't know this. I don't know this. I don't know this. Yeah. And so something seems impossible simply because I don't understand it.
Bingo. Competency.
Okay.
That makes complete sense.
Competency. Yep. Okay. So
I think the thing is for me is the reason why I don't call it a silver bullet is because I realize that I do have a limit, right? And because I have a limit, that may be a limit on time. I may not be able to reach that person in the amount of time that they require, right? That may be an issue of competency. Maybe I don't understand their situation as well as I could. Maybe I don't know how to communicate with them in the way that they need.
Sure. So there's a practical limitation. Like the silver bullet is a silver bullet, but if you don't have a gun, fair enough. But let's not forget that, like, if we can figure out how to consistently do this, then the whole game changes.
Yes.
Okay.
Agree.
So now let's understand what forms a memory, right? So like we talked about salience, we talked about recency. Now here's kind of the other thing. I'll kind of help you out a little bit. But so what we sort of discover, actually, hold on. Do I want to help you out?
I don't know, do you?
Let's let you stumble for a little bit and see, because you're doing great so far. You've already discovered like 80% of it, 60% of it. So let's see how far you can go without any help.
Okay.
All right. So then let's understand the quality of a memory. So how does a memory affect this system?
A memory may change your way of having that pre-reaction to the emotional part.
Good.
It may change your kind of perceptions of the situation before it even reaches the emotional state. And that may temper your emotional state. It may change the possibilities for that.
So our memory can also affect our indriyas, which is absolutely true.
Yep.
So just to give you an example of this, hold on a second. Let's just take a quick look at a scientific study about this.
Sure.
Oh my God.
I think it's the same thing. Like the sort of the same thing with that is anytime you meet someone new, you may have preconceived notion about color of their skin, maybe their gender, maybe dogs, like we were talking about earlier, is like someone's afraid of a dog, based on a previous memory for that scared them. And it makes sense. That memory can change your reaction before you even get a chance to get to the normal emotional reaction. It tempers it, changes the outcomes, the possible outcomes.
Yes. So let's take a look at this. Depression biases the recognition of emotionally neutral faces. This is basically a paper that shows, you can see this or no? You're seeing Air Server. Shit.
I cannot see it. That's okay. Oh, you have it on screen? I can see it now. I'm watching the stream. We're good.
Oh, you're watching stream.
Yeah, don't change anything. You're
okay,
good.
Thank you. Okay, so depression biases the recognition of emotionally neutral faces. This is super cool. So we're going to look at the combined cognitive bias hypothesis of depression. Let me find the right. Okay, So at the level of interpretation processes, dysphoric and depressed individuals display a tendency to interpret emotionally ambiguous information in a negative manner.
That's really interesting, actually.
Current findings suggest that the ambiguity resolution is distorted in the effortful generation of interpretations, and the selection of a single interpretation is most likely applicable. I'll explain what that means in a second, because I think there's a sentence in here. Basically, here it is. Depressed. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Yeah.
Do you think that actually has a carryover to things like text? I found something kind of interesting in the current generation of people online, where for a little while, and I don't know if this is still the case, if you put a period on the end of your sentence, it was seen as rude, as disrespectful, as negative. Do you think that carries over to things like that, communication styles?
What do you think?
I think it does.
Yes, absolutely.
I really think
and this is proof of it, right? So anything that is ambiguous. So here's the key thing. When people are depressed, they report over general and more negative memories. So anytime there's ambiguity, our indriyas are affected by something over here. So there's absolutely something that is altering the way that we perceive the world. This is the biggest thing that people don't understand about depression, is that the real thing that propagates depression is actually a problem with our perception.
Okay.
So people don't realize that you see the world as negative in depression. And this is the crazy thing. It's not that you see the world as more negative than other people. All human beings actually have a bias towards the positive. This is why the lottery exists, because no one thinks probabilistically, everyone thinks I'm better than the average person, even though that's statistically untrue.
Yep.
So depressive people who are depressed are actually better. Let me see if I can find it. Are better gaugers of reality than regular people are. But so what we sort of discover is that people who are depressed are better gaugers of reality because they don't have that positive bias. The problem is, in order for the human brain to function healthily, we require this stupid bias.
We require an extra layer on it to be like, no, it's actually better than that.
Yes.
Or you're going to have a bad
healthy
day.
functioning.
Yeah.
So the glass is actually more half empty. And then the other problem is that there are other problems of perception. So like people will tend to overgeneralize in depression. We'll get to that in a second. And then they see the negative things. So if someone is depressed and they look at an emotionally neutral face, they will see that face as a negative face, even though it's neutral. So you start to interpret all neutral stimuli in a negative way. So there's absolutely a shaping of the indriya, which you correctly discovered. Good job.
Yeah, no, this all makes complete sense, because at a time in my life, I was depressed for a while. And you are completely accurate. When you see people that are just neutral, you think, oh, that person's looking down on me. Oh, that person feels negatively about me. They're not showing an expression like that because they don't want to say it. You know, that kind of a thing. They don't want to tell me that they feel bad about me. So yeah, I totally get it. Totally get it.
So now we're going to get to something even not more interesting, but let's kind of actually let's go back to memories. So how are memories formed? Like, what do you think goes into what gets saved to your hard drive when you form a memory?
I think it's that the original memory modifying from the indriya, and then the emotional reaction that gets saved, and then we have the chance to go and maybe analyze it later. Sometimes people do, sometimes people don't.
Okay.
Introspection is what happens there.
Perfect. We'll talk about that in a second. So let me ask you this. What is the effect of the size of the emotion that we experience on the memory that is formed?
I would say that's pretty correlative a lot. Like if it's a larger emotional response, it's more likely you're going to remember that.
100% right. So we talked about the hippocampus and the limbic system.
Reaction.
Now, next question is, when I recall a memory, what happens in my manas?
And manas is the emotional center. So with that, for me, I don't know if this is the same for everybody, because I only have my perspective on that. I relive that scene. So I'll have like a full video of that. I feel the emotion of that moment, whatever it's going to be. I can recall it. But again, it's recalling it based on kind of partial fuzzy information because it's from a memory.
Okay, so now we've got a big problem. The more emotion we experience, the worse, the more corrupted the save file is, because it's not geared towards reality, because our emotions are drastically changing what the actual input is.
That totally makes sense. And I agree with that.
Emotions change the way we perceive the world, and the stronger the emotion, the more distorted it is. But the higher the emotional energy, the more likely we are to remember it.
Yeah. And now you're getting a bunch of corrupted memories.
Yes. Yeah. This is the way that we live life.
And that changes your perception, and it ends up being a runoff effect.
Yes, 100%. Now, let's just use a very practical example. This is evolutionary, by the way. So what's your favorite restaurant, Thor?
Oh.
I know you're frugal.
I cook for myself.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I cook for myself
what's
always.
your favorite? Hold on. Okay, give me what's your favorite
dish? The last time I ate really, really well at a restaurant was Fogo de Chao. Okay. I love a Brazilian meat house, like steakhouse and that kind of stuff, but that's so rare.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's a real big rarity for me. So
Fogo de Chao. Okay. So you've got this Brazilian steakhouse. Now let's say that you've eaten at Fogo de Chao like 5 times, and you loved it every single time.
Oh yeah.
And now if you eat at it a 6th time, and you get food poisoning, what is going to happen the next time someone asks if you want to go to Fogo de Chao?
I would probably look up the health report for that place, because if it happened to me, likely happened to others. And if that one is the one that's the problem, then I'd be kind of, suspect of it. I probably wouldn't change my feeling of Fogo de Chao overall as a restaurant chain. I would feel about that one specific one may have a problem.
Okay, we just have to make a note. This is too good, dude. This is too good. A check health report. We're going to put that we're going to see what is happening in your mind when you do that. So what happens with most human beings is that your body will have an instinctive reaction to avoid the place, even if it's been good for you. And that's because from an evolutionary perspective, if you get sick from water once and you survive it, we don't want to take a chance. We're going to go to a different watering hole. So part of the reason that all this depressive stuff happens is because from an evolutionary perspective, we are biased towards the negative. If I fight a snake 5 times and it doesn't bite me, and it bites me once, like that's enough. Like I don't need to learn my lesson a second time. So negative things weigh more heavily in our mind, in our calculus of what gets recorded, than positive things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So we store this emotion, and then this is the other thing to understand, is when we store a memory, it goes with the emotion. So now we're going to add something else, which is a samskar.
Changed by it and stored with it.
Yes. Yeah. And so now what happens is when I think of the memory, or if the memory gets triggered, right? So you're pretty lucky because it seems like you had a pretty amicable divorce. But for the 50% of people who do not have amicable divorces, even the sight of their ex comes with a torrent of emotional energy.
Totally makes sense.
In the world of physics, nothing can be created or destroyed. Everything is just energy, right? This is like a universal principle. This is true of emotional energy as well. So whatever amount of energy becomes dormant in our mind will be recalled at a later date if it is triggered in the right way.
No, I agree with that. I think the way that I handle that is lots of introspection. If I'm like, there's a time bomb in there, I need to do something about that. I'm going to go sit down and think it out so I can let it out in a way that is healthy and not damaging to other people.
Yes, that step is going to enter into this. We're going to get to that in a second. So we have a storehouse of emotions. Okay. Now, this is also where we can do a quick aside to something like trauma, or even we can look at depression. So there was, for a while, we believed that depression was sort of a neurochemical imbalance, like there was a deficiency of serotonin in the brain. That's probably not really the case. What we sort of now know is that the number of adverse childhood experiences that you have, so this can be like divorced parents, it can be abuse, it can be getting bullied, it can be moving around a lot. There's just like a list we've done big data kind of analysis of this. The more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more likely you are to be depressed later in life. And basically what's going on is for each of these negative experiences, we are increasing...
You're setting the perception.
Absolutely. You're creating these negative emotional energies. These negative emotional energies do not get metabolized or digested properly, which means that these things then get recalled over here into your sensory input, and it shapes the way that you see the world. Okay? So now let's talk a little bit about how do we metabolize this emotion. So how is it that you metabolize the emotion?
So when I do that, if I have an emotional response and there's kind of a limit, right? It's like there's a moment that's happening where the emotional response starts, analytical side kicks up, and it goes, is this a measured emotional response to the situation? Does this make sense to have this emotional response right now? And if it does, I go, okay, let it go, right? And if it doesn't make sense to have that emotional response, I go, I'm going to step back for a minute. I'm going to disengage from this conversation until that emotion handles for a moment, right? We're not going to yell about it. We're not going to scream about it. We're going to freak out about it, whatever's going on there. And then we re-engage with the conversation. We handle the conversation, whatever's going on. And then that gets stored, and I sit down and we'll introspect on that later to find out, like, what was going on there? Why did I have such a strong reaction to something that didn't deserve such a strong reaction, if that makes sense.
Great. So which part of your mind is doing that?
Analytical side, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is very important. This decays the emotional energy. And this is great. Check the health report. What is that? That's your buddhi acting. This is done by the buddhi. And if you didn't check the health report, then your emotional response would get to go wild.
All of those restaurants are bad. Yeah.
Right. So
it's the same thing with people. It's the same thing with animals. It's the same overall. It's pretty easy to become racist if you have one bad interaction with a person of a particular skin color and you don't have the analysis in place to be like, that was an individual, not a group.
So now we've done a really cool thing. So we've discovered that the way out of all of this stuff is buddhi, our ability to analyze. So now let me ask you a question. Let's say this is, hold on, let me think about this. This is analytical capability. This is age, starting with birth. Okay. What do you think, what does this curve look like? Let's say death.
I think it definitely goes, it 100% goes up over time. Your analytical ability goes up with age, is what I've found. And it's mostly because I have more experiences to call upon to explain the situation.
Okay.
I just didn't have as many experiences.
Let me ask you this. So if this is true and our buddhi gets stronger, if I have an experience at time point T1 and an experience at time point T2, which one do you think is going to color my perceptions of the world more?
It depends. And you said if our buddhi gets stronger, it doesn't always. I feel like that's a muscle that you have to flex.
Sure.
You have to train that.
Would you agree that the average person who is 25 has a more robust buddhi than the average person who is 5?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So
I would say that the first one colors our immediate emotional response more than the second one, but the second one can be more tempered by those experiences through buddhi.
Absolutely. So, right? So good job, Thor. You just discovered why psychotherapists talk about childhood.
It all makes sense. It does make a ton of sense. So yeah.
Right? Because if we sort of think about it, when we have experience as a child, we don't know. So like, let's say I'm 4 years old and my parents are getting divorced. Let's say I'm 24 years old and my parents are getting divorced. When I'm 24 years old, I'm like, thank fucking God. It was miserable being at home with them. They did it for a while, but like, I can see that they're not happy together and it's so much easier this way.
Yeah. When you're a kid, you think it's the end of the world and that your parents don't love you
because
anymore.
Your capacity to analyze it is not good. Therefore, you think they're getting divorced because I did something wrong. And then this gets stored in your consciousness as a samskar. And then the samskar activates at all kinds of random ass times, whatever triggers the samskaric activation. And now what's happening is so if I fundamentally feel unloved, this saves I am unlovable into my hard drive. And now this is going to color your perception of the world. If you have some kind of ambiguous response, hey, I'm sorry, I don't think I can be in this relationship anymore. Oh shit, I am unlovable.
Yeah,
and then
I think that also gets in the way in specific situations where a person is in a location where they're succeeding. So they feel that emotion, even though they're in a loving relationship, they may sabotage it.
Absolutely. This is 100% correct. So this is the cool thing, right? So we can explain so many phenomenon using this model. That so now what's going on is let's just take a look at that example. Here's me, here's you, we're in a relationship. You say, I love you. My indriyas this is what I get from the indriya, right? Indriya, yeah. Thor is saying, I love you. But here comes this stupid samskar back from when I was 4 years old. And my parents told me that they loved me, but then they got divorced anyway. So what did I learn? I learned don't trust people who say I love you. It comes over here. creates a cognitive filter, and then I feel bad. And then I get fucking confused, and this creates all kinds of problems because I love you means it's weird. Like, how am I supposed to win this game when I love you makes me feel bad, makes me feel guilty, makes me feel like this is going to end.
Yeah. And it ends up being one of those situations where they say that to you, you hear it, and you say, I have to end this before it goes truly wrong.
Absolutely.
And that ends up being the self-sabotage.
Absolutely.
In situations we are already winning. Yeah.
Demoralized programmers.
Yep.
Right? Even when they win, they put it in the L column.
Yep.
This other person
even
could have
when they
done
make
it
something
better.
cool, they look at somebody else and they go, that guy could make it better than me.
Absolutely.
Same thing with artists, same thing with writers, same thing with voice actors. And instead of looking at themselves 3 months ago and look at all the progress they've made, they go, look at that guy. That guy's amazing.
Okay, so now we're getting to something interesting. So what is their analytical mind doing when they have a victory?
They're putting themselves down. They're saying it's not a victory because that guy's that person over there is more victorious. They did it better than me. They did it faster than me.
Yes.
And I can't do that yet.
But what should the buddhi be doing? What should the analytical mind be doing?
At that point, they should be looking at their own progress.
So the buddhi should be saying, hey, this is like new data that counters our perception of the past.
Bingo.
So what's wrong? Why isn't the buddhi doing what it's supposed to be doing?
That's the part that I actually don't have a solution for. Because for me, it is immediate every time. It's like, okay, well, I failed here. Why? So we don't fail in the same way again. Exciting, right? We get something new, we learn something about it, and we can do something awesome. There's always something to learn and always something positive to get out of that. And I'm constantly trying, to be honest with you, I'm constantly trying to try little things, like test little things, with the intent of this will probably fail. And then I'll learn something about it so I can succeed in a different one when the stakes are higher. Right? So, fail in tiny ways, fail small ways.
Now we discover the missing piece because our model does not account for everything. So first of all, we've got indriyas. Let's just do a quick recap. These are our sensory organs. Then we've got our manas, which is our emotional mind. Then we've got our buddhi, which is our analytical mind. Then we've got our samskars, which are balls of undigested emotion that go dormant and become recalled in the appropriate thing. So, but sometimes buddhi does a good job and sometimes it does a bad job. So the big difference is whether it's being controlled by ego or ahamkara. So when my ego is involved, so when you say they compare, in order to make a let's talk about comparison. What is required to make a comparison?
You need to have a preconceived notion of that, which means a memory to recall upon an emotion with that.
Preconceived notion of what? What is required?
Whatever it is. Right?
So when I am making a comparison, right? So we're using this example of this other person did it better than me. What is required for that?
So you need to have two sets of data. You need to have the data that you have that is your perception of that situation or that individual or whatever is going on. And then you have an expectation. Whatever the expectation is going to be. It's like, oh, my work is like this, but their work is better than this, right? So, and the expectation is that your work should be like their work because you've spent a lot of time.
Sure, all that stuff is true, but even deeper than that, there's a me and there's a you.
Okay.
Right? There's your work and there's my work. Now, see, here's the really interesting thing. If we literally go back and we listen to your language about when you try something new, there is no ego. There is no this other person and me. I'm going to try this thing because you are the one who tries it, but it is about the trying. It is not about a comparison. If you really pay attention to your words, you will find that there are very few ego-related statements.
I didn't even realize that.
Yes, you're not going to.
Actually quite funny.
Right? Because you're going to say, I'm going to try this thing. It may work or it may not work. Whereas if your ego is active, I could fail or I could succeed. Literally, the world is the same. The thing works or it doesn't work. The question is whether you add I to the equation or not. And if you listen to your language, this is how I know you're ready for the prestige class, you don't make a lot of egotistical statements. Okay. Your ego is there, it's subtle. There's a different version of your ego at play, which is that, oh, I can't do something for myself. I have to do some things for other people, which is how the I is. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different day.
Okay.
Let's keep going. So comparison requires ego, right? So I'm taller, this person is shorter. That requires a me and that requires a you.
Sure.
So then what tends to happen is we take these samskars, and the collection of samskars become something called the ahamkar, which is the sense of I or ego. Now, here's the really interesting thing. There are things that activate the ego and things that deactivate the ego. And the number one thing that activates ego is negative emotion in the manas. The ahamkar is the bouncer of the mind. It's the main tank. And so if you think about what triggers my ego, it's when I'm being attacked in some way. If someone is saying, oh, like, hey, like you're a wonderful person, that may lead to ego, but generally speaking, it doesn't. I know it sounds weird.
I can understand that, though, because you have to have a strong sense of self to weather something like that.
Yes.
So activating the ego would make the most sense.
Yeah,
it's like it's a protection mechanism. It's like they say this, but
yes.
I know who I am. Yeah.
So this is why if you have someone who's narcissistic, validation brings down the narcissistic defense mechanisms. Right? So, and that's not just people who are narcissistic. This is for anyone who has defense mechanisms active. The more that you address the underlying emotion, so we figured this out in psychiatry a long time ago. That's why we're very validating, because then the emotions calm down. Once the emotions calm down, by the way, the ego controls the buddhi. This is the piece that we were missing. So sometimes the buddhi and the ego clash. And when they clash, if your ego is stronger, then it's going to bully the buddhi. So I'll give you an example, my favorite example from when I was in college and was terrible at dating. So Alok likes a girl. I'm Alok, by the way, in this story. And Alok wants to ask out a girl. And Alok asks out a girl, and girl says no. Then I feel ashamed. But I'm not really aware of my emotions. But then what happens is I start making these statements to myself and to other people, to anyone who will listen. I'm not that into her. You know, her loss.
The self bullshit. Yeah.
Right? The self bullshit begins.
Yep.
Now, this is not like analytical. And so then literally what the ego does is it goes to your buddhi and it says, hey, bro, we're feeling bad. Give me a selective interpretation of this. Give me something that feels logical that can help us feel better. So we're going to selectively ignore all the stuff that I'm in love with her and she's amazing and all this kind of shit. And then just give us all the bad things about her. Because if we can put her down, we can feel better about ourselves, and then we don't have to feel ashamed of ourselves. This is how it works.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I can see that.
Now,
I have an experience like that. When I was in high school, actually, I asked the girl out. She actually said yes, but I was really socially awkward at the time. Date didn't go well, and it was more like, okay, well, this date didn't go well, but it didn't go well not because she was rude, but because I'm weird, right? It's like one of those moments, like, I don't know how to interact with people just yet, and I need to work on that. And that ended up being kind of like a catalyst for me I need to understand social situations better. I need to learn that stuff.
So that's a situation where your buddhi did a good job. So your buddhi was stronger than your ego on that day. Because if your ego had been stronger, you would have said, she sucks at relationships. I'm fine. Right? So when the ego is subject to the buddhi, then we'll move in the right direction. If the ego is controlling the buddhi, which frequently we don't realize, everyone thinks that they're logical, but like very few people are, right? You can take any political discussion.
Yeah.
And then like everyone is like, my stance is 100% logical. You are 100% emotional.
It is the worst.
Right? And so that's just because we don't realize that our logic is not always under our control. And this is where people say, okay, if you're emotional, you're not logical. They're missing a step. Emotion leads to ego. Ego interferes with logic. You can actually be logical and emotional at the same time. In fact, your best performance and your closest connection to the truth is going to be when your manas and your buddhi are both active. This is what we call a flow state. So we have a part of our brain called the corpus callosum, and then we have a right hemisphere and we have a left hemisphere. This is our analytical side. This is our emotional side. And this is the part of the brain that allows the two to connect. When someone has a history of trauma, this part shuts off. This is why people end up doing things like dissociating. What is a dissociation? It is a analytical, I'm being physically hurt right now, but I feel no emotions. So you can analyze the situation. You can look at it dispassionately without emotions. And that's because the trauma is trying to shut this shit off. We don't want these two things to connect. On the flip side, we have this thing that everyone cultivates called the flow state. And flow state has increased activity across the corpus callosum. In order to attain a flow state, we need the right level of emotional engagement with the right level of synchronicity with our analytical brain.
I'm actually interested. There was a kind of a case that I read before. Have you ever seen the case of the guy who had his corpus callosum severed?
Yes.
I'm actually really interested in that too, in this case, because the corpus callosum having so much control over this. And in that case, what they had done is they actually had him look at an image with one eye and draw it with the other one, and then look at with the other eye and then draw it with the other one. And they were getting like incorrect images out of it. Did you see this?
Yes. So I don't know that particular thing, but we can, you can, I know what you're talking
I want to
about.
send this to you.
Yeah. So let's understand this. That's because there's all kinds of things. So like the left visual field gets processed by the right hemisphere. We have this part in the back of our brain called the occipital lobe, and it's on both sides. The problem is that there's also other kinds of things. So you can get like right-sided hemi-neglect, and like you can get all kinds of weird neurological phenomenon. We can really get into it if you want to. We can like run through the neuroscience. But basically like, so their right eye will connect to the left side of their brain, which means...
And if there's no corpus callosum, what happens?
Yeah, so I'll tell you. So like if I think I'm rusty on this, I always have to refresh my memory, but... So right eye actually connects to the left side of the brain, which means that if you want to read words, the right eye will be able to read words. Yeah. But the left eye connects to the right side of the brain. Our language processing is on our left, so we have no connection to language processing, so it could be difficult to read words. But you can identify a picture. So like, this is also the kind of thing where it's like, do you recognize what this is? The right brain says, yes, I can recognize it. I know exactly what it is, but I have no access to my verbal bank. So I can't tell you what it is, but I know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at like something with your right eye, you may not get any emotional response. Like, who is this? This is a picture of my kids. How do I feel? I don't feel anything. So there's going to be all kinds of weird phenomena. But then you get hemi-neglect, and you'll get people who are drawing clock faces like this.
That's actually really interesting. The idea that if you look at something with your right eye, you won't have an emotional response. And many times we see in kind of like movies, iconography, things like that, is the squinting of one eye when you're a sniper.
Hold on.
Right?
No. But that's if your corpus callosum isn't intact.
Oh, if it's not intact. Okay,
Yes,
that's why I was
yes.
like, wait a minute. That's kind of an interesting aside for that.
No.
Because I thought about
we're
that
talking about
immediately.
this guy who has his corpus callosum severed.
Okay,
So
yeah,
he
for that
can't
guy.
name something that he sees with his left eye.
Okay, is there any time where the connection would be briefly shut down under any type of duress or anything like that?
Yeah. So this is what trauma does. So when you say shut down, so we have to understand that I don't think like there's zero electrical activity,
Just
but the whole
reduced.
point is that there is reduced electrical activity, which allows for this phenomenon called hemispheric lateralization, which means that only one hemisphere is operating at a time, basically. It's not as bad as a clear physical severing, but this is what leads to dissociation and numbness, suppression. These all are features of hemispheric lateralization and decreased activity across the corpus callosum.
Yeah, this is a whole area I know nothing about, so it's really fascinating.
So this is just we'll get back to the Sanskrit side of it, but I'll drop in neuroscience here and there where it's relevant.
Cool.
Okay,
I'm down. Yeah.
So now we kind of get back to a couple. So now we've got all the pieces together. So now let's talk about, and we still got to talk about one big thing, the thing that we're going to teach you. So if you have someone who's demoralized and you give them this piece of advice. So this is what I would say if you're a programmer who's demoralized. First of all, recognize that the way that you see the world depends on your samskars, or the emotional content of past experiences. So now we also discover the mechanism of psychotherapy, which is what we do in psychotherapy is we take these memories, and then what the psychotherapist literally does, the psychotherapist acts as a buddhi for you because your buddhi is out of whack. And they help you cognitively reframe. They help you recall this emotional energy in the present. Now, you said that when we recall something, we feel that in the present. So this is what's really cool. If you look at the science of people who are traumatized.
Yeah.
So here's my brain. Let's say I have a trauma. This part of my brain is called the posterior cingulate cortex. The posterior cingulate cortex integrates information and decides on a course of action. The thing is, this is in the present. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, right? So if
it does make sense. Yeah.
If I'm trying to decide what to say, I'm integrating information, I'm deciding what to say.
Yeah.
Remember, back here, we've got our hippocampus.
Yeah,
so
if Chad, if you guys have ever seen me like go and talk about something, you'll see that I'll pause for a moment and then like kind of do a recall of like, how do I reframe this that it works for that specific person? I'm guessing that's exactly in that moment, right?
Yes, PCC is active. Now, here's what's really interesting about trauma. So we think of traumatic memories. Where should traumatic memories live in this diagram? What do you think, Thor? I know you're new to neuroscience, but where do memories live?
I'm new to neuroscience of this. I mean, at this point, the deep lizard brain. No, like the hippocampus.
Absolutely. This is where memories live.
Yeah.
Unless you have PTSD. Then you get no activity. The trauma lives here.
Really?
So this is why people have flashbacks. And this is why they can't get past the trauma. Trauma lives with them because it's literally not in the memory part of the brain. It is not in the past. It is a constant thing that you are dealing with today. The part of your brain that decides a course of action today is what's active when you're experiencing trauma.
That's really interesting.
When you do psychotherapy on someone who has PTSD and you ask them to recall the memory, let's talk about when you were assaulted. At the beginning of psychotherapy, it activates their PCC. As you succeed in psychotherapy, it moves back to the hippocampus and then they're free from their trauma.
So you can actually see that through
You can see it through brain scans. It moves. The memory moves from the present to the past. And this is why some people, oh yeah, this person, I never got over my ex in high school. They're still living in the past. I'm still caught up with my ex. It's 30 years later. They've moved on, but I can't move on. Yes, you literally can't move on because the experience is existing in the present in your brain.
Do we understand the mechanism that causes that to be there in the first place?
Causes what to be where?
The memory to be in the present at all times.
Yes.
Do we understand why that occurs?
Yes.
Okay.
Because normally what happens with normal experiences, so let's look at normal experience. And it's not anything special. So right now we're having an experience, right? We're operating here. At the end of this conversation, our brain is going to move it over here. This process is impaired in trauma. Simple mechanism. If you want more details, I can give you more details. But the short answer is that this is the process that's busted, which is why we live with it. And if you get someone's help, they can help you move it to the past. This is also why you don't necessarily need to do psychotherapy. This is why if you look at like even studies on things like post-traumatic growth, the people who, so you can take a group of people, and I know we're kind of getting off track, but let me know if you want me to go back to
the regular track.
So if you look at a group of people who are, let's say, who've like experienced genocide, right? So there's like hundreds of thousands of people, and we've done psychological studies on them. The really interesting thing is that if you have 100,000 people that someone tried to exterminate, let's say 100,000 people survived, not all of them develop PTSD. In fact, less than 50% usually develop something like PTSD. And what happens is we know that there's this function called post-traumatic growth, which you've been through, I've been through, where we go through a traumatic experience and it actually makes us stronger. And so a big part of that is this process of what we call constructing a narrative. And you can't construct a narrative unless you've got multiple points in time and some shit is behind you. So if you literally go through the process of constructing a narrative, so when I was working at like an addiction rehab, at the end of the 30 days, someone would have to they'd have to share their narrative. So we start working on this on like week 2, where you're going to tell the story of your relationship with the substance. The first time you saw someone drinking, the first time you got drunk, how awesome it used to be. It's like this beautiful, like 4-page, 30-minute, like catharsis of like, this is this is my relationship with alcohol. And it's not all negative. There's a lot of beauty and it's really powerful shit. But when someone does that, it literally moves things from here to here. And then they've moved past it. And it has therapeutic value. Their outcomes in terms of addiction recovery improve.
Makes sense.
Post-traumatic growth, same process. We have to construct a narrative.
So really a lot of the process then at that point is trying to move it from PCC into the hippocampus to make sure that it is now seen as something that is no longer a present threat. It is now a past thing to recall to change future outcomes, right?
Which part of our Vedic model does that?
The name is escaping me.
Yeah, so you can use the English equivalent.
So in that case, that would be reliving the memory, so you're doing memory recall, and then of the what is it, samskara?
Yep, the samskara becomes active, right? So when you're telling the story, the emotional energy rises to the mind. Everyone's fucking crying because it's really powerful shit, and then our buddhi,
the analytical mind takes over after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
And then we move past it.
That makes sense. And so it's recalling it, reliving the emotion, reframing it, and then filing it back away again using a more analytical approach rather than just having it up in forefront of your mind.
You just did a beautiful summary, the best summary I've ever heard of what we call emotional processing.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It's literally honestly, it's the best.
Many times in my life.
Because people have asked me, what does it mean to emotionally process? I've never given them an answer as beautiful as the one that you just put together. So thank you for that. So if anyone is wondering what is emotional processing, it's whatever the fuck you just said. I don't remember, but that sounded great. Okay. And this is why we need to process emotions, because until we process our emotions, now we're going to go back to our demoralized person. Where's our demoralized person? So now let's go
they have to experience that themselves. You can't tell them. It doesn't work that way. You have to feel that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also know that, for example, there are studies that show that when you talk about emotional experiences dispassionately, it doesn't work. You have to activate the emotional circuitry.
Yes.
In order for it to work. And so now we've got the demoralized person. So there's the failure. All right. And so remember, the failure, then they have a samskara or their ahamkara, goes over here and then alters this experience. And then they interpret in a particular way. And remember, the demoralized person feels bad about themselves. Right? This is a me problem. My project didn't fail. I failed.
Yeah, they put that as I am the failure, not this project is the failure to learn from.
Absolutely.
And that's the way that I try to frame that for people is I always tell them, go make something tiny. Make something tiny and expect the project to fail and learn something from it. And then move on to make another thing and expect that to fail and learn something from it. And as you learn from this, look back on your past project and go, look at how much better my project is now today because of what I learned as a result of those failures.
So here's how we're going to help the people. They can't do that.
Yeah.
Because
some of them can, not all of them.
Yes. But the reason they can't, the ones that can do it have the ones that buddhi is stronger than ahamkar. The ones who have ahamkar stronger than buddhi, they're not going to be able to apply it. So this is when we get to, okay, how do we help demoralized programmers? We teach them this stuff. So this, by the way, I don't know if you remember, we talked about the overgeneralization in depression. So we don't view things specifically. We lose all sense of nuance. Why did this project fail? There are 1,000 different reasons besides me that the project failed. But when we enter into this negative mind frame, this ahamkar mind frame, we overgeneralize to ourselves. Applying everything to yourself, ego is the mother of all overgeneralizations. It's me, it's me, it's me. No, there's 1,000 different reasons why you broke up. There's 1,000 things going on in her life. There's 1,000 reasons why this person didn't swipe right on you on Tinder. There's all kinds of shit going. There's a whole world out there with like 8 billion people and weather and patterns and physics and all kinds of stuff going on. You are just a tiny speck in existence. Very little has to do with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the overgeneralization is the mother of, this is the source of ego. Okay? So how do we help this person? We do 2 things. One is we can digest their samskars. So remember that this emotional energy up here gets activated and then affects our experience in the present. Right? That stored emotional energy. So if we can decompress that, if we can remove all the crap from the samskar, if we can metabolize the samskar, that will go away. Because if you kind of think about it,
I think that kind of a situation is really for like more of a professional setting is more effective for that. For many people.
We'll talk about professionals in a second. This is the science of it. How to do it, we'll get to in a second. But this is what I want y'all to realize. So if you are a programmer who feels demoralized, the reason, and even demoralized is a good word, because you're not demoralized because of one thing. You are demoralized because of the storehouse of failures. And today, when you fail, the reason you're demoralized and you give up is not because you failed today. It's because you add the energy of all of your previous failures onto this failure. This is why it's overwhelming to deal with. It's not just this failure. You're not looking at it in isolation. They do it once, and then they fail again, and they fail a third time. And then what happens? Now I've failed 3 times in a row. You stack them all together without processing each one. And then the fourth failure, you're not dealing with one failure. You're trying to manage 4 failures. This is how you get these kind of patterns of people who are like, I've tried everything and nothing works. Failure after failure after failure stacks up, changes the way that your mind thinks, and then you start engaging something called the nocebo effect, which is the opposite of placebo. So placebo
Can you explain that term?
Yeah. So placebo is if we think something is going to work, it works. And nocebo is if we think something isn't going to work, it doesn't work. Very simple. So it's kind of
just negative placebo.
Yeah, it's a negative placebo. So there's all kinds of neuroscientific mechanisms. It affects your cortisol and this and that, and we can get into that. It's a conversation for a different day. But it's a well-studied effect. If you don't believe it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. We know that the effect of placebo and nocebo is probably somewhere around 30 to 50% of like the outcome.
Yeah, no, I actually, you see that every day. People are like, well, I can't do this, so I'm not going to try. Or if they say, I can't do this, but I'm going to try anyway, and it failed just like I thought it would. Right? That's a super common thing. Really, really common.
Yeah, it's very common. So going back to people who are demoralized, we can do one thing for them. So you can process your negative emotions. You can also reduce your ego. So there are certain meditation practices that you can engage in and stuff like that. Or even you can do some level of cognitive retraining. So I failed versus so just appreciate for a moment that this isn't your failure. This project failed. And the more that you literally use a different kind of language and different perspective, if you cognitive reframe to that, the ego will start to decrease. You can also do things like shunya meditation, which is meditation on the void. We'll get to that in a second. We're going to get to something for you in a second. I know. You're excited. We'll get there. Don't worry.
I know. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, no, we're going to teach you meditation on the void. Yeah, I know. Okay. We're getting there. You're next. We've helped the demoralized people. So these are the 2 things.
That's good, though.
And the third thing to do if you're demoralized by whatever is happening in your life is just start swimming in this framework. Start picking apart, what does it mean to be demoralized? What part of me is actually being affected? What am I feeling emotionally? Notice your thinking. Is your thinking even logical? You're going to think it's logical, but hold on a second. Really simple test that you can do to see if your thinking is logical. If someone else was in the same situation, would you say the same thing to them? This voice in the back of your mind that you talked about. And then everyone says, of course not. Why not? Why wouldn't you say that to them? Well, tell me why. Why don't they say it to other people, Thor?
Because they don't. I guess the biggest thing is when you see it from your own perspective for yourself, you see all the weak spots that other people don't see.
Even if you saw someone else's weak spots. Would you talk to them? Yeah, would you talk to them the way that they talk to you? This may be hard for you, I just realized, because you don't do this.
I don't do that, so it's difficult. Yeah.
So I'll tell you what they say, but they're different. I'm me and they're them. Right? It's a different standard for you and other people. You may not understand, you're too far along. You've qualified for the prestige class. This is going to be confusing for you.
That's super confusing for me.
I know. You're not going to
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't understand that.
There's a different standard for me compared to other people. Right? So let me give you an example. So when I show up on stream, I try to help people, right?
Yeah.
And who deserves the help today?
Anyone. And people are going to watch this video. People are going to interact with it. I mean, anyone who happens upon it, but even people who don't see it do, frankly. But they may not ever get it.
What about you?
Know? Yeah. I mean, I'm here for that, right? I'm here. So
you're including yourself, but it's for the help for everyone and you're sticking yourself in there. But if we go back to it, this is super subtle. It's there in you, but it's going to be so subtle that you may not be able to detect it. Because
think
you
for
were
me,
interested in something.
I'm interested in something. I'm interested in the
And you chose to pick demoralization of the people in your audience over you.
specifically, yes.
Yes.
The reason why I feel that way is because I most definitely am in a position where I feel very comfortable in my life, incredibly so. And I have basically this kind of setup now.
They deserve it more than you do.
I can keep that. Yeah, they do. That's what it is.
Yeah, they deserve it more. Different standard
to make
for
it
them.
more plainly simple, yes.
Different
they
standard
deserve it
for
more.
them compared to you.
Yes.
It's not so hard to understand.
No.
Just in your case, you're objectively right. But in everyone else's case that sets standards for other people, they're objectively wrong. It's all in their head. It's a bias. But in your case, you have all this objective evidence. See, as soon as the ego enters, the analytical mind gets short-circuited.
You're going to laugh. Chat every single day is like, you deserve it. You deserve it. I was like, nah.
Different standards for thee than for me.
Yep. No, it
Your
makes sense.
problem is that your alignment is on the good side. You're like lawful good or chaotic good or some shit, neutral good. So now you get to use this ego. It's still operating with you. This is physics, baby. You're not immune, even if you're a good person.
No, 100%.
You have to level up in the prestige class to become immune. We're going to teach you that in a second. Okay? But this is this. You say it's really foreign, but you just understand it this way, that you still have a different standard.
Way. Yeah.
And the second that your hum card kicks in, I have a standard, someone else has a standard. And if you're thinking that way, and then you're like, yeah, but I deserve it less than other people. What do you know about the people who are demoralized? You don't know what they deserve.
I don't.
You're overgeneralizing and making some amalgamation. Maybe they deserve it less than you do.
The way that I feel about it is, even if they don't deserve it, that is not my choice to make. Ever. So I'll give you an example. Someone will come to me and they say, hey, I really want to make video games. It is never my position to get in the way. It is never my position to get in the way of that kind of adventure of self-discovery, right? Because I could be gatekeeping. I could be like, oh, you never make it. Don't even try, right? But I've just robbed two things. I've robbed the world of a potentially awesome thing that they could have made. I've robbed more than two things. I've robbed them of the experience of understanding that, maybe understanding themselves more. And I've robbed anyone else that could be inspired by the work that they created. Of course, I'm going to spend the time to do it. Yeah. Even if it turns out they're undeserving of that, that's not my place to tell in the beginning.
Good.
It's not my place at all.
Yeah, so I agree completely with you. So I think this is where, like, what I've sort of concluded is this idea of deserving is like, I don't know who judges that. That ain't.
Yeah.
The only thing that we know about deserving from a scientific perspective is it has to do with your ego. The ego is what decides who deserves what. I deserve this. I'm an incel. I deserve to get laid. Right?
Right.
So it's ego. Ego is this. I ain't no moral judge. I don't know shit. Just like you. And the more
Makes
that
sense.
ego enters the equation, you will decide what people are deserving and not deserving of. I don't have that wisdom. Okay.
Makes sense.
Now let's get to your part. Okay. Anyway, let's finish. So, couple of things. There are all kinds of exercises you can do. Okay. So one is to adjust your perception. So there are practices called pratyahara, which strengthen your perception. And this is where we have this big problem in depression. The problem with depression is that we have an inciting event. Something genuinely bad happens. This has an emotional reaction. This then turns into a cognitive bias, which then we have a bunch of ambiguous stimuli or even positive stimuli that we start interpreting in a negative way. And then we discount this stuff. So this cognitive bias is what happens is the world that you live in becomes objectively worse because of your filtering out information. So if you're a demoralized programmer, changing your perception, strengthening your perception, which is one of the things that we have gotten the weakest at in our society, the most atrophy. I think the number one reason why mental health is getting worse in the world today is because our powers of perception have gotten weaker.
I talk about this quite a lot. Is there's a joke that I have, which is the only day that the way that people act on April Fool's Day is the way that they should act in general, which is they meet the internet with scrutiny. They say, wait a minute, is that real? Before they immediately engage and kind of go on with it. And April Fool's Day is the only day that happens, and that should be every day. April Fool's Day should be every day.
Yeah, love that. So you can adjust your perception through practices called pratyahara. You can digest the content of your samskars. You can sublimate your ego. And if you do these three things, you will no longer be demoralized. You will be able to turn into Thor. If any all out there want to be Thor, this is how you
transform
become
into
Thor.
me.
Yes.
You get the hair and everything.
Yes.
It all comes together. Yeah.
Now let's talk about you for a second. Now we get to the
All right.
punchline, or maybe the beginning, actually. So this is going to be kind of weird. I'm going to actually stop screen sharing.
Oh.
We're going to go back to this. And we're going to move you over here. Okay.
Moving around.
We're going to go back to talking.
Hello.
So there's the physical form.
Okay.
What did we just map out?
We mapped out the entire mental process for everything.
The mental process. Very good.
Yeah.
So here's the question. If we look at a unit that is Thor, does a physical process and a mental process encapsulate, have we filled out that thing? Is Thor physical plus mental?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is wrong.
Really?
So, yes. So now I'm going to...
Actually, wait. Your mental state can definitely set the tone for how you feel about your physical state, if that's what you mean.
Nope. I don't mean that.
Okay.
Yeah. So now we're going to get to... So now here's the
I'm
thing.
interested. Yeah.
There are periods of time where your ego is inactive, right?
Okay.
There are
Yeah.
periods of time where your buddhi is inactive.
Yeah.
There are periods of time where your manas is inactive.
Okay.
So you can have a cessation of thought. You can have a cessation of emotion. You cannot be having an ego reaction. So I'll give you maybe an example. Maybe this works for you. Maybe it doesn't. But sometimes, like, let's say looking at a sunset. So there are times where we look at a sunset where we don't exist within the mind, that we lose our sense of time, that we don't have any particular thoughts. We feel good, like it feels good, but there isn't an emotion. It's not a variation in the manas. There's a contentment, but not necessarily an excitement, not necessarily a joy. There is just a kind of like a weird baseline level of existence.
I actually have a time period of my day every day where I do that, where I focus on nothing. It's usually about an hour a day during my kind of free time, and I will try to focus on nothing. I may be doing an activity at the time that that's happening, but I won't be thinking about how to solve that. I'll just be letting it be blank. And that's usually when I'm hanging out in the ferret rescue, when I'm playing with the ferrets, doing ferret time like that. People see me on video for it. I just, no thoughts, only hanging out, doing the thing.
Yeah, so what are you in that moment?
Nothing, which is kind of nice for just a moment there. There's no machinery running. There's no systems to be solved. There's nothing. It is turned off. And it is my barricade after being on stream and handling lots of questions and helping a lot of people. It is my barrier between that and doing the other things that I want to do in the day. Is I'll have that hour-long thing.
Now this is going to be weird. Okay, so this is why you're ready for the Prestige Clash, because you've been doing it for a while.
Okay.
So you've stumbled into meditation, the truest essence of meditation. So, but now we're going to go into something else. So you say that it's nothing, but I'm going to tell you that that is the fullest moment of your existence.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
It does, because in that moment, it is the other types of things that are going on are kind of irrelevant. I'm just there, and it's nice.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? So now if we really look at it, all of the things that are something about you are actually perturbations of the fullness of your existence. They detract from the fullness of your existence. Now you become reduced to a thought, to an emotion, to a problem solving, to a physical sensation. Whereas actually when you step away from all of those reductions of self, this is when you feel the fullest version of yourself.
That makes sense. Because it doesn't need to be split off, fragmented into pieces.
Very good. Right? So this is what we call Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purna Purnachete Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate.
That's a hell of a name.
It's a hell of a name, right? So this is it's considered it gets translated in the Western religious framework as a prayer, but it's not a prayer. It is a understanding of the nature of existence. So
Okay.
there's the hole, and you can take a drop out of the hole, and the hole still remains whole. The hole actually exists within the drop. And then the drop can re-merge into the hole. It's fucking weird. Until you have these kinds of experiences, you're not going to understand this. But you're actually experiencing the fullness of your existence in those moments.
Makes
Now,
sense.
here's why meditation is important for you. Formal practice is important for you. This is just layer one. In the same way that we have explored the physical world by making a simple observation of gravity, we have these basic sense organs, but then we can, if we advance in this realm, in the physical world, we can make rocket ships and we can harness energy and we can make solar cells, we can make computers, we can make artificial worlds in Second Life. In the spiritual realm, you have entered at stage one. There are stages of this fullness that are even way bigger than this. It's hard to describe because now we're getting into the undescribable realms. Language does not capture it.
Okay.
And so the reason you need to meditate is because there's like all kinds of cool stuff on that road. You've stumbled into step number one on your own. Not actually on your own, but that's a conversation for a different day. But there are more subtle and what I would call transcendent states of consciousness, which we have we've always had evidence for through spiritual experiences, but now psychedelics is making this revival, and people are able to access these states more freely. The problem is with psychedelics, you don't get to control where you go.
That makes sense.
And then going back to, this question about Star Trek, so that is answerable. So once you sit in the fullness of your experience, what you'll realize is that a different consciousness? No, because we're all part of the same ocean. In fact, my consciousness and your consciousness will be linked, and you'll be able to feel that if you explore far enough.
So that's actually the same thing that, remember when I was talking about it's not my place to stand in the way of the other person? That's because when I'm gone, the things that they learned and did will continue on. In that way, any person, their actions become immortal. You're already linked with them. There's no reason to treat them badly and stop them from entering that stuff because together you are creating a richer culture than there was before. There's no point in standing in the way of that. You're actually hurting everyone, including yourself, by doing so.
So now we're going to do something hard.
Okay.
Now we're going to do something that you're going to have difficulty with. This is a beautiful analytical explanation. But the analytical explanation is the translation of something that you know deep within you.
That you're the same.
That? Huh?
You're the same person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? This is just
I know what you mean. Yes.
You do not believe that because you figured it out. The belief or the knowledge came first, and then this is your analytical mind? Yes.
Yes.
So this is what we're talking about. This is why you're ready for the prestige class.
My whole game, Heartbound, the whole thing that I built for it, is as you go through it, as you treat people badly, you yourself find out that you can be treated badly. It changes the perspective of the character. The whole time that you treat people well, you yourself find that you can be treated well because you are everyone that you meet and they are everyone that they meet. It's the same. And yeah, that's kind of been the basis for that for most of my life. That's like a pretty normal understanding for me. So yeah, yes. I totally understand what you're saying by saying you are everyone and they are you.
And this is what's weird, right? So now you say this is a pretty normal understanding in the meditative tradition. In the meditative tradition, you have stumbled upon one of the 4 Mahavakyas, great sentences. These are things that students of meditation are told to contemplate on in order to gain the understanding that you have. And one example of this is Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe. That there's actually no difference between me and anything else. And this is also where if you look at people who meditate, they naturally develop compassion. But we sit here and we try to develop compassion. You can't develop compassion. Compassion's real source. So if you sort of think about it, are you compassionate towards your hand? No. There's no compassion towards your hand. It's part of you. You don't need any compassion towards it. The real source of compassion is when you realize that other people and you are no different. Y'all are all part of one weird fucking organism. And so why would you hurt your hand? You wouldn't. And in the same way, it's stupid to hurt other people. But once you understand Aham Brahmasmi, you have some inkling of this, you've done a lot. This is very good. And what I'm telling you is that if you're interested, there's a formal training for future steps. People have walked this path. You're pretty far along. But if you really want to know, even there's weird karmic stuff too, but I think you'd like
I
it.
understand the ideal of like karma versus dharma, which is like your requirements versus like the best thing you can do, and how those can be different from each other. I don't know if that's all that you're talking about, but yeah, no, I
I'm
know
talking about
some
more than that.
more than that. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Right. So
There are many things in this area I don't know, so
yes,
that makes sense.
I understand. And I think these are for future conversations, and it's not the simple reason. The simple question is, why are you the way you are?
Yeah.
Right. So you have a lot of karmic setup for spiritual practice. Number one at the top of the list is you're amicably divorced.
Yeah.
So you're free from. You're essentially you've got very. If we looked at your character sheet and we looked at your background, you're very similar to a monk. You're intuitively frugal. You don't really care too much for material things.
I have so little stuff.
You have freed yourself. Your soul has freed you from the bounds of a married life. We haven't talked about whether you're lonely or not, but if you're lonely, we'll talk about how you're lonely. I'll tell you how you're lonely. Okay. You're lonely because of conditioning. You're not actually lonely. But if you have some degree of loneliness left, it's an echo from previous connection.
That I'd agree with. I'm really, in that area, I'm super fulfilled. Like I feel really good about that. So,
but there's the echo, right? There's the memory of, oh yeah, there was a point in my life when I enjoyed this thing. And so you may find almost like this small inkling towards it, but when you really stop and think about it, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that completely.
Yeah. It's clear.
Yeah.
So, and this is where I think you got to learn this stuff, man, because I think you're going to love it.
I think I am too. This is actually like way more than I thought this was going to be. That's actually awesome as hell. So yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense.
Cool.
Really surprising, actually.
Me too. I didn't know where this was. Actually, I had an inkling, but anyway. Now that if I'm honest with myself, just an inkling. So now what? What questions do you have?
Now I'm interested in where more do I learn about this? Because I don't know the terminology. I don't know the direction for that, because you have a lot of terms, but they're terms and languages I don't know. Right? Yeah. So that ends up being difficult to research, difficult to find.
Okay. So,
and how, I think beyond that, how do I apply that in a way that doesn't get me disconnected from people that I talk to? Because I feel like there may be a chance for that if it's handled wrong, if that makes sense.
There's a chance for that if it's handled right.
Okay. Deeply terrifying.
Yeah. So I mean, this is what's going to happen. So you've been walking this path of basically segregating yourself from the world, right? So you are in the world, but you are not of it.
Okay.
And so you're right that as you continue walking this path, you will be less of it. But it doesn't mean a bad thing. It's not like you have to disappear and go to a cave in the Himalayas. That would certainly help if you want to do that.
I do live in a basement, you know.
Pretty close.
Close to a cave. We're almost there.
I wouldn't worry so much about that. But it could happen, but not yet. And then in the same way, in the same forces in your life that have brought you to this moment will also, if all you have to do is pay attention, it'll tell you where you're supposed to go. You'll know whether it's supposed to be. Right now, you have a very clear duty that there's a lot of people out there you're helping. You have ferrets and stuff like that. So you got to keep doing that. You don't have to give any of that up to do what I'm telling you to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think I would. So
yeah, I think you know that. So now the question is, okay, so like, what's your next step? So this is where like, I normally don't try to do this. This is not a plug, but like we literally have a meditation guide that I think you should go through.
Okay.
I think it'll equip you with all of the basic terminology. I think you'll understand quite a bit of it. It's just going to give you a vernacular so that you can manipulate the concepts with your mind. The other thing that we can do is I can teach you a meditation here and now, which I'm curious to just try, and we'll see what happens. I don't know that this is the right one or the wrong one, but since all the basic stuff, normally I start with basics, and basics are all in that guide, so I want to teach you something else.
Okay.
If you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm definitely okay with it.
Okay. So what I want you to do is sit up straight. Your neck needs to be straight, your spine needs to be straight, your back needs to be straight. And I think you're going to need some space in front of you. Can you make a circle with your arms in front of you like this?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It's around the mic, but yeah.
Okay. So you're going to need to be able to do that, okay? All right. So what I want you to do is start by closing your eyes. And I want you to imagine that there is a string connected to the top of your head, which is pulling your spine up so that you're very erect.
All right.
So imagine kind of like your spine is kind of like a clothes hanger, and then your body is like clothes, just hanging off the hanger, but there's a lot of rigidity in the spine. Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. So next thing that I want you to do, go ahead and open your eyes. So I want you to make a ring with your hands. Okay. And now, this is going to be tricky. I want you to look at the space in the middle of your hands. Look at the emptiness. So at the beginning, the mind will see objects through the emptiness. But what you want to do is see the emptiness, not the object.
I'm going to move this out of the way.
So just look and try to notice the space. You see the space, or do you see objects?
Space.
Okay. So look at the space and now close your eyes. And now feel the emptiness in the middle of your arms. So now feel that emptiness within the space of the arms.
Okay.
This may sound weird, but what does it feel like to you?
I guess the basic term would be like kind of like rigidity, like a jelly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a jelly.
Yeah.
Do you have a shape of the jelly? Try again.
Kind of what I want that to be, I guess.
So where do you feel where do you feel the emptiness when you close your eyes? In your hands, or in the space, in the circle of your arms?
In the circle of the arms, wherever that enclosed space would be.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So close your eyes. Do it again.
Okay.
So you can look first if you can't feel it, but I want you to just feel that emptiness.
Sure.
And now go ahead and relax your arms. And now what I want you to do, you can relax your arms. You can put them down in front of you. So now what I want you to keep your back straight, neck straight. So I want you to feel the outside of your form. So you will notice that in your existence, you can feel your head, you can feel your shoulders, you can feel your arms, you can feel your back, you can feel even potentially the front of your chest, your legs. But if you really pay attention, kind of right around the area of the solar plexus, you're going to feel nothing. There is an emptiness within you. There's an absence of space. And you can start from the outside and you can work your way in, and you'll notice that at some point you stop feeling. Do you feel this?
Yes.
Concentrate upon that. And now go ahead and come on back to us. Do you still feel it?
Less, but yeah.
Okay. So now there's advanced stuff, but to start, you can do some version of these three practices. So if you want to, you can start by looking at the space and then close your eyes and feel the jelly. And then throughout the day, I want you to notice the emptiness within you.
Okay.
The other thing is that you'll notice that all kinds of stuff is like, I don't know how to describe this, but there's all this stuff around it. And all that stuff fluctuates and changes like pixels on a screen. But the emptiness within you is the screen itself. So just spend some time there.
I think I understand what you're saying.
So spend some time there. And when you're done spending time there and you want something else, you're ready for step 2, you let me know.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And I think the thing is with that, I don't think that's the first time I've felt that.
No, it's not.
No. That's really interesting because I don't think I've ever intentionally done that, intentionally felt that in any way. But that is something that I have felt that way before. Exactly. And I'm trying to place when.
I'll tell you
why.
You felt that place when you were struggling and you put stuff in there to stop struggling.
But there's nothing in there.
Yes, that's why you can put your struggles into there and it disappears. You've connected to that when you needed it most, or if you were unable to connect to it, you suffered. That point is what you connected to when you transcended suffering. I could be wrong.
I'm really interested because for me, the way that felt was, yeah, it was kind of like that feeling when I had, there's a place that you go when it becomes too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that place is similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, it was, best way is to describe it as like TV static. There's too much going on. There's too much in there. There's too much happening. That's not there anymore. There's nothing there. And I think that's something that I've never like kind of sat down and thought about that before. That's a different spot now where there's just an empty room, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I sort of follow you, but the more static is there, the further you are away from the empty room. But at the same time, the static really isn't there. The only thing that's always there is the empty room. The static is actually an illusion. But it is so enticing or engrossing is a better word. The static can be so engrossing that you lose sight of your center.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that anymore. I think I used to have that a long time ago when things were quite bad.
Yes.
And as things went forward and I kind of unpacked stuff and I learned how to manage that myself, I don't have those moments anymore. That's why I can just sit down and be like, I'm here now. This is fine.
Yes. Yes. This is all consistent. So you do this for a while. You play around, and then you let me know when you're ready for part 2.
Sure. I will.
Also, you can go learn what part of the world do you live in?
I live in Washington State in the U.S.
Okay. So like the other thing that you can do is you don't have to do part 2 with me. You just go and go to some ashram or monastery or whatever, Zen, whatever kind of thing you want. And then if you want guidance, like if you're like, hey, I'm interested in this particular thing, or this seems interesting to me or whatever, like you don't have to learn from me. You can go learn from anybody. Now that this has started for you, it'll go on its own. So you ask the universe for help. If I happen to be a manifestation of that universe, I'm happy to, but you can go anywhere and it's started. The train has left the station.
Yeah, that's really like there's a whole thread you've basically unraveled there for a sweater that I didn't even know existed.
Yes.
That's effectively how that feels.
Yes, yeah. yes. So now you just need to keep pulling. You don't need me. But I'll
around. I'm going to do that. And yeah, no, I'd definitely reach out with that. That's actually, there's a lot there. Now I'm really interested. Thank you.
You're very welcome. No less than you deserve.
You say that. Oh, man.
Any last kind of thoughts, questions? We've been at this for 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
It's been quite a while.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, that is everything. Is there anything, like, I would ask, is there anything from chat that you guys want to ask?
Great.
They're spamming chat with hearts. I see all of you. Now the supervillain arc begins. I'm on my way. This is it.
No,
once I gain full mastery. Oh, you've become the supervillain?
I'm going to become corrupted, and you're going to have to take me down.
This will be it. This will be the intent, and then you'll have a redemption arc. That's how it should go, right? The full hero's journey.
We'll see. Sometimes the supervillain just ends as the redemption arc.
That's true.
We'll see.
That is true.
Okay, so questions. I'm happy to answer questions that chat has.
Yeah, I think the only thing for me is, interestingly enough, you said that it is, when it works, it means you become disconnected from all these things. Effectively, is that the path of becoming a monk? Removing everything and realizing that it's not as important, sort of a thing. And like I've seen this before, the path of going down that. And I think the biggest thing is, for people that want to go down that route, it ends up not being a choice. I've seen in many, it's like a calling sort of thing. It's like, this feels correct. This feels like the right direction. And so I understand that entirely. And I'm interested in, where is the basis of that belief structure?
What do you
Where
mean?
did that be? Do we know the origins of that?
Absolutely.
Because it seems like a human calling. Something that just kind of
we
happens
absolutely. So the beautiful thing is that so for the tradition that I'm a part of, the origins is not so the whole point is that it is not like this thing was discovered and now it's known and now it gets transmitted to you. The whole thing is that every person has to walk the same road. So the person who discovered this tradition, you are that person. You have to walk the same road. So there was one guy probably about 10,000 years ago, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 years ago, that is probably known as Shiva or Adiyogi. So there was one dude who's probably, from an anthropology perspective, there's probably someone who discovered basically like the stuff that we're talking about today. And then that guy started exploring in this way. And then as he explored more and more and more and more and more, he started to like figure out all kinds of stuff. And then what happens in the world is when you have a being like this, there is a natural drawing of other people to these people. This is why religions form around them when they become quote unquote enlightened. It's not
You're
like
saying chat is actually a cult? Is that?
We try very hard not to be a cult. And if we ever stopped trying to become a cult, we would become a cult.
Yeah, that's true.
But there is a drawing towards of these people. And I'm not talking about me, by the way. Looking at you.
I know.
So this is what happens, is people are drawn to you because of your tranquility or some shit. Who knows? But there's something that people look to these people and they say, okay, like I want a piece of what this person has. But that's probably historically where it came from. And then there's a set of practices that were developed that then like there were a bunch of like gurus. And then the gurus at the end of the day, this is just an internal exploration where anyone who does this exploration will discover so far what we believe to be basically the same thing. So if there's a shoebox and there's an object inside, anyone who looks in the box will find the same object. And thus far...
And once you start that discovery, you find the same object.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is what kind of gets turned into what we call kind of the karmic religion. So this is like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, to a certain degree Sikhism. But there are independent corroborations of this in many religious traditions. So Kabbalah is a good example, like in the Jewish tradition. Like if you look at Kabbalah texts and like the Samved from Hinduism, the texts are very similar. If you look at Sufism, so that these paths of mysticism, the mystical branches of all of our religious traditions are basically very similar.
It's one of the things that, like, I have a cursory knowledge of a bunch of different religions, and I found that is the case. Yeah. There's many different sections that are mostly the same, and then there's very specific sections where they branch off of each other. And yeah, no, I totally understand that completely. It's one of the reasons I ended up not being heavily religious, is because I was like, I understand the message here. I don't need to ascribe to the one belief structure, if that makes sense.
And that's this. I had a very similar experience in terms of following a particular guru. So I studied with lots of them because I didn't feel like one was any particularly. I mean, I've had a couple that have been pretty important in my life, but that too, I've started to understand that that's just the person that I had in that moment, and that person helped me along the journey, and that's what a guru does. You don't necessarily need to attach yourself to one until the right one comes along, and you attach as long as you need to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions from chat, or did I answer your question about where
that
answers
my question?
Yeah.
Yeah. That answers my question completely.
One last thing just about being a monk. So I think that like monk is a job, but the whole reason, so you don't need to become a monk to do this. The thing that you'll discover over time though, is that the lifestyle of a monk physiologically supports or increases the likelihood of creating the neuroscientific states that are transcendent consciousness that are similar to like psychedelic experiences. So for example, when I'm doing my more hardcore meditations, I have to be very careful about what I put into my body. So even like if I eat meat or fast food a single time, the quality of my meditation goes down to like 10%.
Yeah, I don't eat fast food at all. Like I cook all my own food. I do it really simply because it's just, I feel terrible if I don't.
Yeah.
Like I just
so
feel
that's consistent. So you don't need, I mean, so
Yeah.
there are formal places where they do that kind of stuff. You're kind of figuring it out as you go, which is fine. And then over time, what you'll kind of notice is that like certain foods and stuff will like, I would describe it this way. So that doesn't become important until you start getting quite advanced. So for the average person, they don't need to do this, but you kind of think about it like a bodybuilder. Like if you're a bodybuilder, then you have to be extra careful. Even 10 extra grams of carbohydrates will completely fuck everything up. So the higher you go on the bell curve, like the more sensitive you have to be to continue to climb.
Yeah, there's only like one time even a month that I eat something that's like bad. And we have this joke in the stream for the burrito index where we determine how many burritos I can buy from Taco Bell based on the ad revenue from the stream. And that's the only time I do it. I was like, okay, I'm going to eat 3 burritos from Taco Bell today. And that's it. And then like the rest of the month, it's all cooked by me. That's it. And it's funny too, because the largest food expense I have is those 3 burritos from Taco Bell, because fast food's crazy expensive now.
I know, it's crazy. It's nuts.
Wild. Yeah. They're up to $5.16 at my local Taco Bell for a 5-layer burrito, up from like $4.75 last year.
What are the layers in a 5-layer burrito?
I don't know. I just know they're called a 5-layer burrito, and it's more than $1 a layer, so I should know, right? Like it's ridiculous at that point. But no, we've been tracking it for a year now. We've been watching the burrito inflation over a year, which is quite funny.
That's sad, dude.
It is sad.
Yeah, so I think this is the universe's way of telling y'all to stop eating burritos.
Yeah, stop it. You know, it's really bad. That's the only day, like I'll eat them. I'll eat them. But it's the only day of the month where it's like, I'm eating this with the full knowledge that I'm going to feel gross afterwards. Like, fine, right? That's the one day for that. You know, the rest of the month I just cook all for myself.
Okay, cool, man. So any other questions from chat, or are we?
That's up to them.
Are you still streaming?
Oh no, I'm not streaming. I rated over to you.
I know, but I mean, are you going to stream now?
No, I stream from about 1 a.m. to about 10 a.m. PST every day, sometimes up to about 12 noon.
1 a.m. to 10, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I stream from about 1 a.m. to about 10 a.m. I streamed a full 9 hours before coming on here, actually about 10 hours before I came on here.
You stream in the middle of the night?
Yes, every day. So I started that tradition because it was a competitive thing on Twitch, because I looked at the analytics and I was like, where's the time where I can carve a name for myself, right? Because you want to get into what are called the Kingmaker slots inside of the category. The category is Kingmaker slots are the top 3 inside of the category, right? Whatever is going on there, people are more likely to click that. So I ended up streaming at 1 a.m. when it had the least amount of competition. This allowed me to sit in the Kingmaker slot, even though at the time I had about 100 average viewers. That increased the amount of followers I got per hour from about 1 to about 7 to 8 per hour. So it worked. It was very effective. New people started piling in, and that allowed the community to expand upwards. And now when I sign on, all of you guys are there, and it's the whole community. It's everybody is there, and it's
what time do you go to bed?
People. I usually go to bed, so I have the same schedule every day. I'll work 8 hours on stream. I work 8 hours off stream. I do about 16 hours of work a day. I have 3 hours of free time, and I sleep for about 5 hours. And Chad is always like, "That's not enough sleep. That's not enough sleep." I went to the doctor for this, did sleep studies. Everything is fine with me. So it's completely like a healthy lifestyle for me, and we know that it works, and it's not leading to like some kind of degradation or anything like that. But it's the same schedule every day. Sometimes I have my 3 hours of free time before the sleep. Sometimes I do after the sleep. It's kind of fluid with whatever way that I feel that day. But it's always 16 hours, 8 hours on stream, 8 hours off stream. And if the stream goes longer, it'll cut into that second 8 hours. But I always get whatever work done outside of that. It's usually like management work stuff or working in the game or whatever it's going to be.
So that also is very consistent with monk mode. So
I have a very structured lifestyle, incredibly structured.
So as you're careful about what you eat, do you drink caffeine?
No. Okay. No caffeine of any kind. I don't have coffee. I don't have energy drinks. I drink water, orange juice, Ovaltine, and cranberry juice. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So if you skip caffeine and you're careful about what you eat, if you eat non-thamsic foods, you don't need more than 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night. And you're also waking up at, you're prepping for Brahma Muhurta a little bit earlier. But there's even some interesting stuff around circadian rhythm and physiology, because it sounds like you wake up at close to midnight.
I'll wake up at about 12:30, about 30 minutes before stream starts.
And then you probably sleep around 8 p.m., right?
Usually about 7:30 to 8, yeah.
So that is very consistent with the times of waking and sleeping at several of the monasteries I've been to. So,
really?
Yes.
What?
So there is a period of time between about 3 and 5 a.m., really 4:30 a.m., which is very conducive to meditation, the pre-dawn hours.
Okay.
And then sleep should be soon after dusk. So dawn and dusk are the best hours to meditate. And then like even if you look at like matins in the Catholic tradition, I think it's around midnight. So monks will wake up frequently around midnight. You're a little bit earlier, but I'm not surprised at all that you need less sleep given your diet, lack of psychoactive substances, And
Yeah.
then, well, I didn't ask you about others, but we won't.
No, I don't drugs of any kind either.
Yeah.
Like the way that I feel about it is this: I can get through my work schedule every day, and I've talked to Stream about this a lot. I get through my work schedule of 16 hours of work, 3 hours of whatever I want, and then 5 hours of sleep, without extra variables. If I had an extra variable to that, like drugs, like caffeine, like energy drink, any of that stuff, I may not be able to do that. So I just don't. There's no reason to. If I wanted to test those types of things, sure, but I don't really have any reason to. So I just don't, right? And if it does throw off that kind of a rhythm, then it could be detrimental, and I just don't want to deal with it, frankly. So I just don't.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of what we miss out a lot on, especially when it comes to things like caffeine, is there lots of studies that show that caffeine is healthy, for example. Mm-hmm. But healthy depends on what your baseline is. So there are also studies that show that injectable insulin is healthy, but injectable insulin is healthy if your blood sugar is out of whack.
Yeah.
So the health benefits of caffeine or any other substance, if we look at something like marijuana, there are studies that show that marijuana is effective for treating anxiety. So marijuana can be used as medicine. That makes it healthy, right? Well, yeah, but if you're sick.
If you're sick and if you do it in moderation, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is true of all of our medicines. Our medicines are only healthy if you're sick, like cholesterol medication, insulin, whatever. And so I think what a lot of people miss out on is if you do a population-based study on caffeine and you say, okay, caffeine is healthy because we measured the population of the United States or Europe or whatever. The question is, what is the baseline of that population?
I think that's what it is for me. Is I found my baseline and I know what that is.
No, that's
I worked around that instead of around a baseline that includes stimulants of any kind.
Yeah, right. I think that makes sense. Cool. Do you have a suggestion on who we should raid?
Oh, man. Let me see who's on. You go look.
So let's raid somebody.
This is a really good talk, by the way.
I enjoyed it a lot too.
Let's see. Actually, let me see if they're on right now. Are you familiar with Alveus Sanctuary?
Yes.
I think we should raid Alveus Sanctuary.
Let's do it.
They're what they do, if you guys don't know, they're a sanctuary for exotic animals. Awesome as hell, run by Maya. Really, really cool person. She does some awesome stuff. They do the same stuff that we do for the ferrets, but ours is specifically for ferrets and theirs is specifically for like a lot of different exotic animals, right? And it's really, really cool. So like Maya's awesome as hell. Really, really cool. Awesome stuff. And they have all these cameras for all these different types of animals there.
Let's do it. So I'm raiding now.
Hell yeah.
Oh, we are unable to raid.
What?
Give me
Is it broken?
Maybe they have raids disabled. I don't know. Maybe it's.
Oh no! Did you spell it right?
Yeah. I mean, I saw it pop up, and I'm pretty sure it's the same one. Try again.
I guess not. Damn.
Oh no, it worked. It worked.
Oh, it worked. Okay, good.
It just said we're unable to raid at this time, and then it said, okay, now we can do
Twitch has been having some issues today. We had some issues earlier. My stream dropped out, and everyone had to refresh. We lost like 3,000 viewers. It was weird issues with the platform. Yeah, happens sometimes.
Thor, it was awesome talking to you.
Was that awesome talking to you as well? I really, really enjoyed this.
Likewise.
So, thank you.
Good luck, and good luck with everything to you and everyone in your community. Thanks to everybody for showing up today. We hope y'all learned something, and if y'all have more concrete stuff, let's think about. I would love to do a follow-up, so let's think about what that could look like. We may even be able to focus a little bit more on people who are struggling in some way.
I agree with that. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. So Thank you.
Take care, man. Bye.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. I have rated. Let's see if it's... And then I think we're done. Am I done? Am I still here?